Yeah, I have two stays there.
Where's Sean?
Hi, good evening.
Castilians.
Good evening. Thank you all for coming. We're gonna go ahead and get started so we can get through this agenda. It is Thursday, June 12th. Welcome everyone to the Historic Area Commission meeting. We're gonna start by having each commissioner state their name so we can establish a quorum. Kick us off.
Cynthia Batty.
Kevin Wade, Michael Westman.
Tara Hayward, Rivas,
And Layla Hamrin, architect.
and Jeff Bergstrom, building official, is also present. She's making me okay. So I wanted to go ahead and start by reviewing the minutes, and then we're gonna do a quick update for the signage document. And then we'll get into the
I didn't have any changes.
I didn't notice any either.
Yeah.
Do you have any changes for the minutes, Kevin? No. I don't think they were well noticed. Okay. Someone like to make a motion?
Motion to accept the meeting minutes of the last meeting. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Moving on to the signage in the Historic Commerce District update. We're still reviewing that with Antonina, but
Yes,
Layla has some more.
I had
There's a whole lot of people here. Could you just tell them what we're talking about so that they understand?
I think the Historic Area Commission wanted to put together I think if I misrepresent you, let me know.
Yeah.
Sort of a white paper about all of the guidelines and the standards that apply to people who want to put signage within the purview of the Historic Area Commission. And the idea is that would be supplemental documentation that would be available on the website. So, there's already on the city website, there's the guidelines, there's a listing of all the properties within the National Historic Landmark District boundaries that was updated. There's a graphic supplement. So the idea is to put out their information that can help applicants understand, what are the big elements and what needs to be done in terms of conformance. This one is about signage. So they had been a draft put forward. I know the city was looking at it, I know the city solicitor was looking at it, Jeff and I had discussed it. And I have, as I do on a regular basis, as the city architect, I had a meeting with the city administrator and with legal counsel. We do touch bases on, half year or every year just to see how things are going and discuss that. And I think even though these were developed and reviewed and the Historic Area Guidelines and Standards, when they were proposed and adopted in 2016, had been developed with legal counsel at that time. Again, this was an opportunity to talk with the new legal counsel of the city, relatively new, and they confirmed absolutely that there was no issue with the way the guidelines were written and the fact that HAC deals with all issues of size, location, materials, appearance, and all things of that nature, because it's not about content. And if it talks about, lettering, painted, that is all within the purview of HAC. And I think one of the things that we want to make sure is we also understand that even though the document, references code provisions that have to do with the commercial district, other districts, the bottom line is these and everything that HAC, the purview of HAC, is kind of self-contained within the section of the ordinance and the code that refers to the purview of the role of what HAC does. And it's within that context that when the guidelines were approved by city council and the ordinance, that was a section that was modified. So one of the things that we think is going to be most productive, all of the documents that are on the city website that relate to HAC are specifically reference only HAC and the guidelines. All things that are the references to the other areas of the code, or for example, the other provisions on signage within the code, that's all information there, but it's not relevant per se to the specific purview of HAC. So what we are going to do is working, and obviously this will come back to the commission, and we can do that fairly quickly. We're hoping in the next month or so, come back with a streamlined version that has all the content that's HAC specific, and putting aside the content that references, if you go to the commercial district code, it references HAC this way because it's kind of going a little bit beyond. And this way will be consistent with all the information that HAC has put onto the website. So I think that'll be keeping all of the provisions, the graphic illustrations, the good practices and things like that. It's just going to be streamlined to focus just on the parameters of HAC and what HAC, because everything else, the fact that other code provisions reference people that they should come and have the okay from HAC, that's sort of a secondary reference. We do know that the purview and the way, as the legal counsel confirmed, is clearly established within the elements of the purview of HAC. What you need to look at, how you can look at it, and it's part of the process if you want to put anything up there. So I think that's going to be the direction that we'll be going in. We're hoping to get you an updated draft within, a month or so. I know the summer months are a little bit challenging, but hopefully July, and circulate it for impact. But I think the good thing is it's always good to have, confirmation. And it's also is good to have things that are focused and streamlined so it doesn't get diluted. And that should apply to all the areas that are within, the district, both the National Historic Landmark District and the local district, which covers pretty much, notwithstanding the zoning, it covers geographic area that has these limits that's beyond whether it's zoned one way or another. And that's what the purview of HAC is the physical, what you are located, what you do. If there's secondary elements, whether it's, residential or commercial, that's more the purview of, the secondary review, what's appropriate in that district. But what HAC, if any sign wants to be put in any of those areas, it does come to the Historic Area Commission for the physicality of the object. So that's why we're sort of refocusing to not dilute the impact that's going to be put on the website.
That concerns me a little bit because about a third of the city code is dedicated to the preservation of the historic district. And HAC has jurisdiction over that part of the code. That's very clear in the code. So I'm a little concerned about excluding code references when in fact the code references are directly related to the historic area commission.
The code references relate to the fact that it's wonderful that the city of Newcastle generally really is a very good steward of their historic fabric. But when the code will reference in a drawer thing when things need to go to HAC, but within the purview of HAC itself, the purview of HAC is to look at applications for a certain type of work that's being conducted within certain geographic limits of the city. And they're geographic because, it's the local historic district, the National Historic Landmark District, which was expanded. And that's where HAC sort of opines on that specifically. If it were a different proposition that they were potentially changes to the code that's a different type of consultation. But on the other hand, HAC cannot, at least in the way the purview is written here and the way it's been understood when we did the update, and now we have it's a broad but clearly defined scope of purview. And I think at this point, it's good that we should have something that conforms with that understanding of these purviews, because by being clearly defined, and it allows us to have a clear guideline and a clear endpoint of people who are wanting to do that sign, notwithstanding the code or the zoning or other elements. We understand that it's clearly defined that they have to come to HAC, that they need to get this approval on specific elements that are important and related. And I think that makes them that much more clearly defined. I also think it's a great way to get them out there and up and promptly without sort of going to more ramifications. And we can certainly have an aside conversation when you see the draft that we're coming up to.
So, but then that would pertain, because I've written a whole lot of other ones, ranging from instructions to real estate agents, real estate lawyers, new residents, new businesses, street furniture, I've written all of these.
Yes,
You know, so if this guidance applies to all of them, you know, I need to understand it so I can revise.
yes, and I
them.
think that's where the articulation comes, and the fact that there's all this information, if there are different ways to also distribute that information. There are the things that can be put on the city website, so people
Right.
go with a specific process of going to the city for a specific goal, which is getting a permit. So they're into this administrative process that has them be here like everybody's here today.
Right,
The other is we now have a good packet of information that you can work potentially with other partners. For example, we talked, and Kevin had mentioned that if there are ever training sessions with people in the real estate community or people, you know, sending, that information is still there and valid, but at least it allows us to get the information that's relevant to everybody who's here today, make it as easily accessible as all the other information that's under the hat header when you go on the city website.
Okay. I got a hold of a document, that Tara turned me on to an association of organizations like ours, so, which was extremely interesting. And one of the prominent documents they had on there was how to communicate with people at large, which we do not do a good job of. So I'd like to see us at some point, all read that thing, it's not trivial, and set up our communications program, because again, I mean, Tara knows this, and I know she's thought about it, but we don't do enough communicating to people, this large group notwithstanding.
If we're talking about the National Association of Preservation Commissions.
Yes.
So we had been in touch, and they came, and with previous HAC members, we organized a camp where they came and they spent a whole day, and they did, it was a training session. We got a certified local government grant from the state of Delaware Historic Preservation Office. And this is something that, should there be other grants and one wants to do a training for different topics, that is something that's definitely of value.
All trainings are wonderful. I'm talking about a communications campaign,
Yes.
which is different from training. So,
Yes, but
yeah.
it,
But they
these
can
are all
come-
things.
Yeah, they can do a
they
workshop where they can really
Mhm.
come, because they are resources with, and the people who come here are not theoretical. They're people who are on other commissions, or they're people who are members of SPO. So I think what I'm just saying, they're a great resource. They're familiar with Newcastle, and absolutely it's a good idea to reach out to them to see, you know, as long as one has a focused goal, it's a very good resource to follow up. Absolutely.
Well, thanks for the update. It's been incredibly frustrating and taking way too long.
But there's a, you know, I'm the eternal optimist, so there's a good
I mean,
endpoint there, and that's
That's
we're
good. So
moving along with it.
Did
so-
you hear anything else from the solicitor during that conversation about code enforcement for things that violate the, both the codes for the historic district and or that have been denied by,
No.
historic area?
No, the
commission?
conversation was pretty much on, this is the framework, this is what we have, these are the guidelines, you know, and it's always good because sometimes questions come up just from the public or generally about the enforcement or the purview, and it was just the confirmation. Signage what came up just because this was a conversation in recent times where little people are mentioning that, and because there's this clear distinction between whatever is content and whatever is the physicality of the object. There was no issue on that end. And I do know that in enforcement, there's a whole process of protocol being put in place by the city. That's gonna be following up on that. But no, our agenda for the conversation was quite focused on reaffirming, you know, the purview, the enforceability of the guidelines and the way they were stated, which was helpful.
All right.
I would like, before you pivot, if I may just make a little bit, I'd like to just have a quick thing about the recent vernacular architecture forum.
Yeah, of course.
I just want to point out both to the commission, everybody who's here, there was recently the Vernacular Architecture Forum, which is this large grouping that comes, and I have people whom I know in the preservation community, and it just happens that two of the people who came were people whom I met at a conference, and they're based in Montreal. And one of the tours was a tour of historic Newcastle, but also part of the VAF was that they had information where people could just do their own self-guided tour using all the information. And the reason I mention this is because it's not just what this commission does, it's what all of you do. They were just astounded. I think I mentioned it this morning when we met, right? That they were just astounded at how rich the city was and how unique an experience it was to be able to walk and, as a pedestrian, experience both, you know, the high end, but also what we call the vernacular regular architecture, that it kept such an integrity. And both of the materials, and we're talking brick, we're talking doors, we're talking scale. And when they were saying how wonderful it is, I always like to share that with people, because you are the people of Newcastle. So I just wanted you to know that your great historic district is appreciated way beyond the boundaries, and everybody here is just doing a wonderful job. So I wanted that kind of, my little thing of having in the record. It's kind of the rah-rah Newcastle, but it also explains why I'm so thrilled to be able to do what I do when I'm here. So there we go.
I'll say, I was on the VAF planning committee and we had the highest sign up for the Newcastle tour than any of the other tours that we offered in the state for that conference. So yeah, we've already had some repeat visitors, so it's exciting. Just one thing I wanted to note, so those yellow public notice signs that are taped on your window, after this meeting, you can remove them. I just noticed when I was walking around town that there are some still on people's windows that have been there for like, I think well over a year, and you don't have to leave that there. Once this meeting is over. Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of them out there.
Yeah, yeah. But that said, so if we could have applicants, as we go through this, if you wouldn't mind sitting at this table, it's not to single anybody out or, you know, to make you feel like the spotlight is on you. It's just a little awkward when the room is this full to talk to people and they're like in the back row, especially when we're dealing with site plans and things. So, the first application that we have is 122, 124 Delaware Street. Al Boland building a deck in the back of property. Yes.
Point of order, we had a previous application that was tabled. Unfortunately, and after that conversation was tabled and we had a meeting on site with the applicant and with the architect who's here today. And I've just noticed, then they shared updated plans, right? Mid-May, and they were sent, but I realized they're not in this packet. This is still the old two-story deck. So the one question that I want to ask, and I know we exchanged, I know you submitted the updated drawing. Did the application cover update ever get submitted with new
Yes.
information? Okay. And did that application, or you can share them today, have sort of materials indicated on it, more detail?
Could have them, the Al and also
Okay,
paper speak on that.
so
We're
I,
doing material.
and so I think just because, since, you know, you are here, you are on the agenda, there has been an update, we met and we talked about those updates, which I appreciate, by the way, the change of scope. If it's okay with the commission, and Jeff can correct me if this is appropriate or not. If we're comfortable, because this is an application that has these types of documentation, it was tabled. It can either be sort of, and when an application is denied and there's a new application, there's no resubmission cost because it's been changing. Clearly, there's been an administrative error here along the way. I reached out to Marika. She wasn't able to send me the updated application at the time. I could just say procedurally, we could deny this application, still consider new application, the new design with all of those, and if we don't have an application to address on, then decide whether this could be based on the information shared
The tier one.
in tier one after, so that, you know, so you should not be having the impact of what potentially has been an administrative miscommunication in the information. So I think if that might be a two-step.
Why don't we ask them how they feel about it?
Yeah, so I mean, if that's,
Can you explain what you're proposing?
I'm proposing the formal application we have in the packet, that's an application that was tabled, but that has a
original
previous
application.
design, yes.
Yeah.
But it's still here and it's on the agenda, so since it's been here, we would have to act upon it and deny it. And then consider if there's a new application with a revised, that doesn't require additional payment, it's just we know an updated application is in the system. You can then explain the design that we talked about and that you modified, we can have a conversation, if there are any other questions. And at the end of that, potentially, if most of the questions are answered, it can become an administrative follow-up. Or if there are other questions that come up, I don't want to speak to what the commission's gonna have, then it just, at the worst, comes back at the next one, if there are additional questions that need to be answered, because obviously.
Leila defined administrative follow-up.
Oh, and that would be typically in some cases when there's a consultation, so this would be a consultation, people come before they actually submit the application. They present the design, they present the details, that allows them often not to go too much into all the construction documents. And HAC reviews it, HAC approves it and said, you know, when the permit documents like the structural, the actual details come, if they are consistent with what's approved by HAC, they can be reviewed by myself and Jeff and get an administrative tier 1 approval. So then when
So
they
you
come,
don't have to wait a month.
so you don't have to wait a
Yeah.
month to come back to historic area.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's sort of the whole process, if that's acceptable.
So
to HAC.
because of mistakes not related to you, what appear to be mistakes or oversights, we can't approve your application because we don't actually have it. You can use this episode to explain what you intend to do and then take next steps with.
Which should be quick.
Yeah.
And the other thing is table applications after 60 days either have to be denied or they are approved by omission. And we can't do that.
Unless
so.
they are tabled with the applicant's consent,
Yeah.
that's the only. So.
Either way, it sounds like it's to your advantage to say yes.
Just to be clear, your choice is either to get the V tape or accept to be denied and ask, present tonight and ask for a tier 1 review.
Yes.
Of what you present.
Yes.
So we'll treat tonight as a consultation. Should we go ahead and? Yes. Okay, so I think just based, because this information that we have, the information that was sent to us is not the current version of what they're going to present. I think we should go ahead and do a motion to deny this application, and then we'll go through the conversation. Someone went to.
Does that take care of paperwork?
Mhm.
Make a motion to deny the application.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And approved.
Now tell us what you're gonna do.
The revised.
Or for one.
The first application was for a 2-tier deck. The Norley had an existing deck on the rear of the property that had caught fire and was demolished. So the owners are looking to rebuild the deck. The original application that was just denied was a 2-tier deck on the main level and then up on the second level. After we had a meeting with Leila and discussing the concept of the project, there was concern about massing and the massing of the 2-tier deck. We took that under advisement and consideration, and very quickly, the next week, we revised the drawings, which I have here today. That eliminated the upper tier deck completely. So the proposal today is to have the main deck, which is still on your drawings, that you have, but if you want to, look at those. The only difference is that the second tier is eliminated. That's is the change from the old application to the new application we're talking about tonight. So we have the deck on the main level, and then we also, which still remained, was having stair access from grade level down to the lower level. I'll show you elevations in a second. That also would have stairs that would go up to the deck, so that anyone on the deck would also have an egress out from the deck down to grade. There's also another problem with the function of the restaurant, in that being deliveries. And trying to get deliveries into the restaurant and not having to go through the front doors. So there is kind of a makeshift ramp right there at the site right now, because they're trying to get deliveries, but it's very steep. So in part of this proposal was also to create a ramp that would be from grade level, that would scissor back and get it down to the lower level. It's not meant for handicap accessibility. This is a service ramp meant for deliveries and of goods that can go from grade level down to the lower level, that can go right into the kitchen. So that doesn't interrupt the function of the restaurant. So as you can see, we have one tier deck. we have removed the second tier deck. And here it is in the back over. If you need me to bring this closer, I can. So you can see the first tier deck. There is, here, this is the grade level. You can see the scissor back ramp that gets us down to the lower level. And then the stairs that come down to that, from grade to the lower level, and then the stairs at grade that can also access the deck itself. That's really the only change from the original application, taken under advisement from Leila in our conversation when we met, was because of the massing, was just a little bit too much volume. So we took that under advisement and eliminated that second tier deck to make it more palatable. So from the original application that you had before you, that was denied, the only change is the upper tier deck.
The other thing is, if you could also speak, because we also talked about the railing material, which you talked about having it to be wood because of the proximity. And your original application had everything as being composite, and we had talked about coming back with wood. It wasn't specifically in the updated drawings. I want to make sure that if you could explain and state that for the record.
Yes,
That
yeah,
the-
I mean, we just talked about that. Yeah, the railings will be wood, the deck is composite, either timber deck or Trex. Yeah.
And that's a question where, you know, this is, you know, if that is, because it is quite visible right from the public right of way. And so that is one question that has to be considered. And I think the other thing is we'd need to have, and if HAC is comfortable with my judgment, have more conversations on the detail of the railing. You know, because for now it seems to be, you know, like thinner vertical
That's
components.
just a graphic, this is for presentation, we
Yeah.
haven't done construction drawings.
Exactly, so when there's
Because
construction drawings, that's when you submit those, we'll have a conversation to make sure, and we can communicate beforehand just to make sure that all of those details are, you know, suitable to the scale of what we're trying to do. You know, we had talked about wood deck, but you know, that was one of the things about typically when things are visible from the public right of way, we do try to go with wood kind of throughout. And so that was the one thing where I know you mentioned composite, but I said, you know, in my perspective, wood would be the best, but this is a forum where you can present your choices and your conversations. There was one small detail, but that's kind of the code in Jeff, you know, which is not HAC per se, is that ramp going down and the fact that there's no rails like on the street side, but that's kind of a different constructability,
That's
different
trivial.
conversation.
Do you have a structural engineer on your team?
I do,
Okay, because this is in a high wind zone and it's in the floodplain.
okay,
So we got to address those issues. So I didn't want you to waste time on a design that didn't address those issues when it probably minor, but you've got to make sure it doesn't fly and
okay,
the
I see,
the raging floodwaters don't knock it over. It's not gonna be tough, but
okay. If there's
if we do that in the
specific,
first place, then that'll be, you know, it'll be one and done.
and no, thank you for that information, if there's specific criteria that you require,
International.
then that would be good for me to have.
International Building Code will tell you what it is, because this part of the building, you can't use the existing building.
Right,
So this will be just International Building Code. And
Are you
the
on-
load and stuff is the same as Newcastle County.
Okay.
When you load and snow. it's-
are you on IBC 2018 or
We're,
21?
we're in 18 headed for 24. it looks like.
Oh, wow, skipping one.
We're going with that.
Okay,
So.
I hope, we're actually, working with the county right now. We'll
when,
match up, is there changing to 24, we're going to go from 18 to 24.
Yeah, because
But then you'll have to watch out for the railing code. Okay, you'll need the structural engineer for the railing code on this,
okay,
but it's gonna be a good project.
so when will the 24 be put into place, or where, or?
I will let you use the 24 code right now, it's my purview.
Okay,
You can use that and then no matter
If it's
how long it
strictly
takes, they wanna go. It's a little stricter than
Yeah.
18, but but you can use it right now, even though we're under the 18. I would take the submission in 24,
Mhm.
in the 24 edition. But if it happens to be you're halfway done with your drawing and we adopt the 24 code, I didn't want you to have to go back and start over again.
okay,
I want this project to succeed the first time.
absolutely,
Yeah, so
So like from my perspective, just with the design, with the fact that now we have a single story deck, or don't have that huge massing, with the fact that now the materials of the railing are wood, the fascia will be wood, the decking, if I were to prove this fully, you know, like 100% should be wood. I would be comfortable recommending that this design be approved. The other considerations about code and things like that, that's Jeff's bailiwick. And if you have some
I'm
comments.
sure about the track not being so durable.
Well,
But it
again,
can't, it's up above your,
I mean,
it's up above your.
it's not
field.
completely, because, you know, it's, when you walk up, you're kind of actually right, that's the thing, right? When we're standing there, you're literally gonna be right at the edge of, you can see that, like, if you just put a human being standing next to that slope, you're literally gonna be eye level with the tracks. And again, these are things that, this is what my recommendation would be, and then each hack member can.
If you're unsuccessful with the tier one, you can always come in front of the commission again, and then it's a matter of making
Well, I think
your
the
case
tier one,
and
the
then-
only thing that's there is I would not recommend composite because you're so close and visible, and you know how about edging goes. If you're gonna have wood railing, wood fascia, everything is wood, and right at your nose, you're gonna see tracks, it's gonna be like,
Yeah, well, we would hide, if we did it, we'll hide that. And
we have to, you know, we'd sort of have to look at the detailing, and that's something that once you consider all of this and how you're gonna couch your recommendation. But that would be the only thing, because it is visible, because it's kind of like waist high, pretty much, and I'm not super tall in some areas when you walk down.
I have a hard time visualizing why it's not okay, you know, and I think seeing some would help.
Well, it's like, because when, I mean, tracks is not wood, it's like if you had a porch, like the porch that we looked at last time, right, where they replaced all the, and it's clear because you see the ends of the boards, and it's on a porch, and you can clearly, tracks and wood do not look the same. We've had others where it's been happening and it's been okay when it's like on the second floor, and you can see the underside, you know, you have the wood structure, and over it, in some areas, it's on the second floor, and that's not, it's not visible. I mean, anybody looks at a Trek end piece and you know that it's Trek.
Somewhere in the middle, but if you ran the skirting up to cover the edge. of the
Well, I mean,
board,
that's
you
what
know,
was
nice
mentioned.
Wide, expensive piece of redwood
But I
skirt.
think if
There's an
we're-
argument to be made if you'd like to make it.
I think if we're,
I think that argument, if it's going to be made, should be made in this forum, so
Oh,
that
in this form.
if it's going to go
front
to
of the
tier
commission.
one, it's the detail of the motion, which then allows us to proceed on an administrative.
We're here now.
Well, that's what I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, because that's what I said, okay,
Right,
if the
that's
tier one
what-
doesn't work, you can come back.
what we're doing.
I would much like for us to have a consensus, so when we go to tier ones, we are all on the same page and we can proceed.
I think if we're considering this now, going by the guidelines, so this is, you know, we're in the heart of town. And it is, even though it's in the rear of the property, it's still in a highly visible location, and it is on the,
It's on the walkway to the
it's on the
bathrooms and
walkway,
the park.
and.
So right away.
And I think that, I agree with Layla's recommendation. I think we should stick to the criteria that we have to
To
evaluate
wood.
this.
Isn't there wood that's kind of toughened up, you know, is.
It's Epay.
Yeah.
Even that's really good, there's also, I don't know that anybody's used it here, but the the cost, but there's also a cellulotised, oh gosh, it's a cellulotised wood, which is the one that we talked about,
Right.
dipped in vinegar, and then that kind of like, you can couch canals with it, and that's not gonna.
And that's getting cheaper.
Yeah.
It's coming, they're adding fireproofing to it too.
They're also.
So
great
I
then,
think looking at those would probably be a good direction to go.
When we met, we also looked at the adjacent property that had the decks along the side. What was that material that they next
It's,
door?
the
that
other one
they
is
have?
wood, the one where we actually allowed treks was on another property, it was on the second floor, where they
In
came
the
up.
back of a building,
And not completely on the
Facing
point
up.
right away.
yeah, facing a part of line.
So this is very visible, and you know, it's just like, to your point, if this was the same location and somebody was putting a brick paving like inside. And if somebody had put concrete blocks instead of bricks, no, you're visible, it should
We
be.
made the guy.
We made them
across the-
remove the
Across the
concrete.
walkway, they had to take all their
Yeah.
non-compliant masonry out and put in the right stuff. And then right across the walkway, that guy had to put wood decks on, I mean, the previous owner had to put real wood decks on there. They would have a sort of a complaint if they had to look down. Trucks, they might,
It's the visibility and it's the proximity, and it's kind of, it's something that's very much the character when people are gonna go on that deck.
but now you've got a decision now, so you're not off on a tangent, you're not wasting another month. So now you know.
Yeah.
By the way, I'm also an architect with this firm. One thing I did want to point out when I hear you discussing
And
it,
your name is?
my name is John Fitzpatrick. I think you're right, in how close the deck is as you're coming up, but this is a deck that's really in the back. And the only portion, as you can see, the deck is L-shaped. You can't see this portion of the deck, you're almost 20 feet from that walkway. Nobody, me, you, no one knows what that deck is made out of. And if the front skirt over here is covered on the blunt end, no one, unless you're standing on top of that deck, looking down at it, will ever know what that deck is comprised of.
Yeah, I would agree with that too. I'm actually.
20 feet away from that walkway. I'm like, my eyes aren't that.
Yeah,
good.
as long as the end boards are covered with a skirt, like he was saying, you can't tell.
If you're coming, if you're coming up,
If you're
Right,
coming
you're
up, going
coming up
down,
the
you
street.
can't see this
And
portion
you're-
of the deck at all. You see the 12-foot portion, which is still set back 1 to 10 feet from the walkway, and that can be completely covered with skirting.
I mean.
We're gonna do that anyway.
The only way you could see it is if you stood on top of it and looked down to see what it was, if you were standing on the deck itself, but there's no way from the pavement, from the walkway, from the staircase you put in, you'll never tell what that is.
Well, from the staircase, there's a staircase, right, that goes up.
Right onto the property, yeah.
Yes, right, so if I'm at the bottom of the stair and I'm looking up, what do I see? I'm not seeing a skirt, right, because I'm going up onto the deck.
So the patrons you're talking about.
No, I'm talking if there's a staircase.
That staircase is for the patrons who are in the
Does
utilizing.
it have a landing?
Yes, but it's on their property,
It's on their property, but is that landing visible as I'm walking up the street?
It is, but at that point, you're actually below grade, so and just in the capacity, you'd have to look down to see that, to look at that landing, is it looking like?
I have to say, if they had wanted to put on the lower portion, if you came and said, we want to put, concrete pavers on the back, I'd have to say, no, you can't, you have to put brick because they're.
Well, suppose they'd use
So-
wood on the landing.
So what I'm saying is that is the notion of where you perceive a space, you perceive from different locations of different areas. Now, and I'm not trying to, I'm just saying that's what the guidelines are for, that's how they are written, and that's the interpretation. So that's my recommendation, that the whole thing should be wood, including decking, because there's this notion that it's gonna be a different perception from the wood. So that's, I understand.
But I mean, the
It's wrong to
trick,
make those
as far as the trick stuff goes now, I mean, you really can't tell the difference, one. And two, it's much more durable. Yeah, I mean, you can go 20 years at a track stuff where I did a deck last year with pressure treated wood and it only lasted like a year. And you're helping
They are other
boards.
woods that last more than a year. There are many other woods.
Yeah,
that
I mean,
last
an
more than a
E-Pay
year.
lasts forever.
You know,
It's not
and-
that it's last forever,
Oh,
but it's very
but-
expensive.
Yeah.
And I,
But there
listen,
are things in between, and it's the same, I mean, and I understand, and I'm not dismissing your point, I'm just saying we've talked often about alternate materials and where they're visible and where they're not visible. We've talked about that for brick, we've talked about that for windows, we've talked about that, and we'll have other conversations, although those are more replication in kind. And I think the value of when people come and say what's unique about Newcastle is we really have a whole sense of what historically this was like as a place that's evolved. It's because of these materials. And I'm not waxing poetic, like as a historic preservation, but there's very much a texture difference.
I have to tell you, I'm fine with you when I think about it, because I agree with you, I'm on your side, in the sense that this is what.
Yeah,
it is
so
for
am
them.
I.
And I want this, I mean, honestly, I want everything to succeed on every level. I'm like, and I think their business is also integral to downtown. I'm like, having a place to go and eat and relax. That's how I became aware of them to begin with, is that I had.
You ate there.
I ate there. I'm like, and I live in Philadelphia and I drove down. I'm like, and that's why we come. You do this in wood, you have to remember, the back of the portion of the building obviously isn't historic at all. But I want to still keep it, the flavor. I want to I want to like be integral to the importance of Newcastle, and I want to be important to them too. And you guys are important to each other, really, excuse me. And I just think if this was so prominently featured, I'd be like, yeah, there's no way. But it's a restaurant. I'm like, the flooring's gotta be durable. I'm like, if somebody falls, gets a splinter, and as ludicrous as that sounds, that crazier stuff has happened. The Trex, it's hard, it's durable, you never have to sand it, you don't have to worry about like pieces of it like pulling up in a storm, being weather rotten, this doesn't happen. And to jump through like a hoop to say, well, somebody walking past up of that block, 10 feet, like looks over and happens to see that the landing, which is like, 4x4 with below grade, happens to see that might be Trex. I can actually take that out and we can make that portion wood if you want, but you'll never have that visible from any side, like, unless you're standing right on and looking at it.
I was gonna say, piggybacking what you were just saying, that it is, we could do a dual thing where the ramp and the stairs and landing are wood, and then the deck itself has the Trex on it.
I just looked up, what does Trex look like, and I've got pictures of T-Rexes.
Doesn't look anything like that.
Like a T-Rex.
Suspicion also says that there might be feathers, so you can't. But Trex comes in a multitude of colors.
Well, that was what I was trying to think, it's like, what if it's
Yeah.
painted?
You can get gray, wood, you
No,
can get
no,
white.
But what if it's colored so that it looks painted so that
It has that. It
Yeah, I
comes
mean,
red.
you can't tell the difference when you're walking on, like, nobody could tell the difference that it's not wood unless you'd like, look at the end, with the back.
I mean,
Reason I'm saying that, I'm literally building a deck right now in my house, out of the tracks. And it looks great, and it's easy to work with, and it's durable, and it's much
I've got
better
a
than.
big Trex decks in my house.
Yeah.
It wasn't cheap.
Grades.
Yeah, it isn't cheap.
it doesn't look,
And you know, it even has a gray.
Put everything in there, feel like you.
It's it, we're not doing anything.
Can I bring us back a little bit?
Yeah,
We
let's-
need to-
Please,
we need
actually
to
like the weather.
refocus here. I hear everything that you're saying.
Yeah.
And I understand that you're.
Here, I can't hear you.
One conversation.
Yeah.
Conversation.
We need to.
The chair had a thing.
Please. I understand, wanting to use the Trex product. What we're trying to do here is we have specific guidelines and standards that we have to follow. This is a highly visible area, and we can split hairs and say, you won't be able to see it from this perspective, or you won't be able to see it from this point, but we also have to be consistent. This is an area that's visible from really all elevations, from the back and from the side, because they're visible to the public right of way. If this were in another location, then the Trex decking might be possible, but I think we have not allowed other applicants to use this product because of the location. And I think it's really important that we are being consistent with our decisions, even though we evaluate things on a case-by-case basis, because of the visibility, because of the location. I think we need to stick to the guidelines that we have. I think this needs to be a wood deck. I don't think this is an appropriate place to use a composite material because of its location and because of the visibility. That is what the guidelines state. And we can be flexible when it's in good areas, but I'm just thinking, again, we stated there was an applicant across the alley who had to take up materials because they didn't comply, and use that same argument, well, it's shielded by landscaping or other things, but it doesn't matter. That's the criteria that we have to go off of. And it's really important that we are being consistent to each applicant that comes before this commission. Are there any thoughts from?
Well, I got one, who comes up with the criteria? Yeah, I mean, like, can we challenge the criteria?
No,
So,
go to the Board of Adjustment.
yeah, so to step back, the Historic Area Commission design guidelines and standards were developed when we did the update in 2014. There was a whole process, and I'm assuming you were here, but where there was the Historic Area Review Commission, which was an advisory board that has members from the business community, from the Historical Society, from the county, and and there were many public meetings. There were public comments. It was presented. So when there was a consensus from this whole group, drafts were presented, they were read in front of city council, they were reviewed. So that's the whole process that went through. And all of those actually, I have copies of all the comments, and there was also a large discussion on alternate materials, where they were appropriate, where they were not, which is why there's flexibility in some areas. It's through that process that we came up with a two-tier review, the administrative review. So then they were all adopted, presented to council, adopted, incorporated into, into the ordinance. So that was the whole process. So those are the guidelines themselves. The administrative review process is that there's a tier one, you come to tier two because it's new construction, it automatically comes to hack. Beyond that, if there's a hack decision that you don't agree with, there is an appeal process. So if there's an administrative review, after that, one can come and appeal to the whole commission. If that, then there's potential to go to appeal to the Board of Adjustment. So I think then the process is, and if you want to question, like if the commission is, and I don't want to speak for them, but let's say the resolutions, they approve everything with wood, and you want to question the use of wood, and you can speak better because you know the whole process with the Board of Adjustment, whether you do a conditional appeal just for that fact, that's something where Jeff could speak, but that's what the process is. The guidelines themselves were very inclusive in terms of the wide swath of consultation, and so they sort of stand. The decision itself of the Historic Area Commission, there is a process within there by which they can be appealed. And the next step is, obviously so then, and I'm assuming if everything else, you could always do a point specific appeal about,
I just want to get to work, I don't want to appeal, I don't want to fight, I just
Use wood.
want it,
No,
that's what we're gonna have to do, we're gonna have to do work.
May I make a comment? I only met Timber Tech today, and that was by way of a T-Rex. But there's a lot of different finish types of this product. There's one which is a hand scrape finish in their legacy collection, because I think they've probably understood problems like this. This is a commercial grade situation. It's not a backyard. So, and I think I'll probably make myself unpopular with everyone in the room, but I think we have to some extent, acknowledge that look-alike materials move on and get better all the time. And at what point do we tolerate a look-alike material that does the job well enough?
That is a discussion for another forum and another day. For now, we can only proceed, to be fair to everybody, with the guidelines that we have and the framework that we have. And the conversation at the time for alternate materials, it's not just about appearance. There are other factors that come into play. It cannot be a factor in the decision because this commission has to make a decision. Now, the other thing is also, the commission does not have provisions for treating commercial properties differently from residential properties. That's just the way they're stipulated because it was a layer of complexity that created a special category, which would not also be fair sort of to everybody else. So notwithstanding, those are not facts that we can take. From my professional perspective, these are not facts that I recommend can be taken into consideration when making a decision.
Okay, thank you.
If I could add something, the commission is made up of people who live in the community. City code official doesn't live in the community. The architect doesn't live in the community. The reason there is a commission of commissioners who live in the community is that we can reflect the values and views of the community. We all have had experiences with hack. I think everyone has griped in some way or another. I'm sympathetic to your substitution of materials. I have one vote, and it's not certain. It would depend upon the extent of your persuasiveness, the facts you can bring to bear in a review here. For simplicity, and if I'm getting a sense of the commission as I am, you probably want to get this thing underway.
Yes.
But again, we do bring an interpretation that comes with living in the town and having neighbors with budgets and houses and everything that goes on when you live in a living city. So,
Do you have anything else, Nicole?
I don't.
Are there any public comments on this agenda item? Um, Do we feel comfortable moving forward with a motion?
Is the motion based on Trex or is the motion based on wood?
I'm not sure we can do much. We don't have drawings.
Well, the motion would be to
Deny
approve the
Yeah,
concept
but in
based.
this one,
No, we've already denied the application.
We've done that, so the motion would be to approve the concept, but with a change in material so that it would be all wood. And that if everything, once the application comes back as to label it, it can be reviewed and approved as a tier 1. So it doesn't have to come back before the commission, and that will expedite this process.
I mean, I think that's the best way to get moving on 95% of what you're trying to do. And if you want to sort of get to the drawings and the permits and all that, and if forever you want to question the notion of the decision on the wood, that is something that you could have everything approved but the decking. And at least, because the Trex in itself is not going to make a huge differential between your calculation of structural engineer.
No.
So
It's a
I think
finish.
that's where it's a forward-moving option. And you can then sort of see when you're working through the permits and the drawings. And Jeff, I think that kind of makes sense to move everything else, because you are gonna need to do all the work on the structural counts and everything like that. And I think I think for me, that would be, yes, if that's approved, and if they still have a qualm about that one thing, then there are options that are out there to be revisited.
So the motion would be for all wood.
The motion will be for all wood as presented with a detailing the raving and the railing, which is wood, which you've committed to, you know, the fascia which wood. And when the permit documents are ready, the permit drawings, then I would review and, you know, and that's, you can always have an internal conversation, but at least it's helping you move on 90%, 95% of the design. And then, you know, deciding which is the element that really is so, and you can have interim conversations while you're developing your construction documents about other options, or maybe looking at other woods that are competitive, you know, price wise or duration, things that are out there to the point of the associated wood is really interesting how it's coming up and it's becoming more available. And that's kind of like almost a win-win. But I said that's used to be put around the sides of canals.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's.
what's it, Leila, what's it called again?
Oh, I can send it out. I think it's this. It's treatment, it's kind of like vinegar type.
It's acidulated wood.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and it's
What's
literally.
Acidulated wood.
Thank you.
You mean
My
So
brain was on
treated
medication.
acid.
What's that?
Been treated with acid, is that what you're saying?
Similarly, yeah,
Similar.
it's a vinegar based, so
And it has a complete.
it's essentially petrified wood.
Yeah,
That it keeps its texture and I mean, the fact that it has this whole dimensional stability in exterior, which kind of makes it, I don't know what the market is like. in terms of-
Actually,
isn't that what's under Venice?
strengthens the wood.
What's that?
Isn't that what's under Venice?
No, it's just cold water, just keeps all those logs completely intact.
Oh, I
Yeah.
thought they were fossilized by now.
They probably are.
No, this is new and they've used like a lot in Europe and
Yeah, they are.
Amsterdam and other places like
I
that.
don't even know where you even need to get that, to tell you the truth.
I think that's a different conversation, the market conditions. I know that it's
And
starting.
you're not picking that up at Home Depot.
I don't think big
No,
money.
but they're trying to market it, so you might have enough.
Yeah. But I'll send a link just to the hack members, to Marika, just so you see what it is. It's always good to know about new materials.
Can I ask one more question?
Of course.
The structure is the structure underneath it all. What's the fastest way that we can get to that, get that going?
Get the permit drawings. If there's a tier 1 approved review, you'll still need to have like the full drawings, but you can have all the architectural to one point, push the structural ahead, you know, but I would need to look at the architectural, like all the railing details and all that kind of stuff. So that can be like a tiered. When the structural drawings come in, you have a whole process to reviewing them too, so it can go in parallel. That's why the whole point of turning this into consultation with the commission being comfortable enough to say that the next step can be an administrative review. So I would look at the drawings, make sure that they conform with the scale that you showed here with the intent, and you wouldn't have to wait to come back to hack, as long as, obviously, the longer thing's gonna be able to structural engineer and all that thing because of location.
Let me see it now. I never heard of it, but there's a lot of it on the web, and there's also a lot of articles about price comparisons of different qualities of it and stuff like that, so.
It's penetrating much more than it was even 2 years ago, where it was still a novelty, and now they're really trying to.
And build with wood, when it rots in 8 years, come back in and ask for.
That one,
It does, I mean, honestly, to be totally frank with you, Trex actually even looks nicer because it's never gonna peel, the paint doesn't come off it. I'm like, listen, at the end of the day, we're gonna do whatever you suggest. I was like, but at the end of the day, I'm like, it's actually the Trex that's going to be the most durable, but you will never tell what it is, no matter where you are. This is not on somebody's front porch, it's in the back, it's 20 feet from anybody's visibility. And it's a commercial building.
So I also wanna say, I am gonna have to push back a little bit because, they're doing treatments with, like pine tar and linseed oil, which is extending the life of wood for, decades and preserving it. So,
So you don't want this painted, you want it stained?
no, I'm not saying that. I'm saying if we're talking about, we talk a lot about replacing things with wood. Obviously, newer wood is not, it's not the same quality as old growth wood, the old growth wood that we have in a lot of these buildings.
But you're also suggesting things that are really, I mean, to suggest acidulated wood is kind of like, it's kind of funny. I mean, and I'm not trying to be sarcastic.
Because it's
but like,
super new.
yeah, I mean, like you're saying, well, you get acidulated wood. I'm like, they're building up in Venice. And I'm like, they're trying to build it back, the back to say like, you should get tar and to tar it and then I'm like, it's really kind of like, that's really.
I mean, it's not, it's a wood stain that you would use. I think we're getting a little bit off
Yeah, I
the
think it's,
rail here.
it was
Yeah,
just, I think just to sort of come back to what we're trying, what the standards say. I think just like you were making a point that alternate materials are evolving, right? You're saying like, how Trex is evolving, that's happening all across the gamut. So we weren't saying you should be using, you said, because Jeff said it's becoming more available. I just put that there as an example of things that are out there. I'm not saying it applies to this. But this progression that you're seeing in alternate materials is also happening for natural materials. That's just the conversation. I think here, based on the guidelines and based on the visibility, my recommendation for that would be wood. I think if we want to keep this moving, is the best way is to actually get through everything else that there's an agreement on. And if HAC decides that the stipulation is wood, I can't speak to what that motion is going to be. And then if that remains a point of contention, there are mechanisms by which that case can be made.
Never mediated, yeah, I mean, we understand.
I think we're just running around the same lap and not going anyplace.
have that cooperation.
but we appreciate you coming in and talking through this with us.
So who wants to make a motion?
I have one more
Robert, you have
question.
a
One more question.
Regarding the wood, are we talking pressure treated wood, obviously, because it needs to be, waterproofed? Or are we talking pressure treated wood that is stained? Do you want it stained or natural wood?
I mean, that's something I think is that you can have the conversation of what's the preference, what's the aesthetic, what's your railing gonna be, what's your final sort of design, and I think that's where we're not micromanaging the design in those decisions, it's more about.
No, I'm just wondering, because I
No, we
know.
don't speak to color.
We
Okay.
can't do color.
Yeah, we don't.
No.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there are many
Don't-
people we
don't-
would like to have told not to do.
I'm
so.
actually
Don't
quite happy that
encourage
we don't,
them.
because that's something that's replaceable, but that's a different conversation. Yeah,
Don't
that's an
encourage.
architectural decision that you can make and we can have a conversation.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've been in front of different historic commissions and some of them
Yeah,
actually,
no.
they're very
Yeah.
particular about
This one.
types of, materials and finishes, so.
Yeah,
that's
this
why-
one, we do not, we do not talk about colors or thing, I mean, that's not part of the purview.
Okay. It's
and-
just the material itself.
Yes. And then the tax page, we can always have that conversation.
Yes. All right, with that, I'm gonna go ahead and make a motion to approve this, this design in terms of how it's presented, with the stipulation that the materials are all wood, and once everything is drawn up, if it is, if it matches what has been presented here in terms of material and design, then it can be approved as a tier 1.
One second now.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion approved. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Hey, for these guys, just so you know,
Coming in.
we saw the fire and we were so.
You know, it's this Sunday, it's one whole year.
A year,
Yeah.
well, well, I'm so glad you survived.
Yeah. We did. All right, thank you, guys.
Thank
Have a
you
night.
so much for coming in.
Made your points well.
Next on the list, we have 21 East Fifth Street, Louis McConnell. So homeowner and contractor?
Yes.
Okay. Would you, start by telling us, about what you'd like to do?
Well, I'd like to replace 2 windows on the first floor out on the street.
Okay.
That's what I'd like to do. Okay.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead?
So, yes, and, so we met on
Mhm.
site, evening a couple of times.
Yeah.
And, part of it is for part of the work that I do for the city to go and confirm the conditions and, poke and see their holes and stuff like that. And, pretty much that would have allowed to be a tier 1 if there were the conditions. Now, based on what I saw of the windows and the muntins, yes, there's coating to be redone, there are issues like that, but there's no structural issue within the windows themselves that would require full-scale replacement. They definitely would need to be cleaned and refurbished and reinstalled. So based on the parameters, the guidelines that say, to demonstrate the extent of damage that requires their replacement. And, you have some pictures here. I took a number of pictures when I was there, and they are, there's some gaps because the windows are crooked because they're old and they have to be cleaned. But these are windows that could easily be refurbished. And since the guidelines state that we have to demonstrate that they need to be fully replaced, that's not a condition that I could recommend. So when we met, I said that as a tier 1, I could not recommend their replacement, but they could always choose to come to Hack and make a case and see. So that's why we're here today. And I appreciate, by the way, the time you took and the hospitality to show and look at the windows, and we'll be doing that again with the future, another applicant today.
Can we speak to the price of this refurbishment?
Unfortunately, we cannot, because as I explained when I was there, when we did the whole guidelines update, people had mentioned the notion of financial hardship and the fact that cost came into. And one of the things that the whole, the advisory board and all the stakeholders, it came to bring the fact that if you take into consideration cost and you take into consideration hardship, then you have to take into consideration the demonstration of hardship. Now, we had this conversation this morning too. And then it becomes, well, how can you determine financial hardship if you don't start asking people a lot of information on their financials? Whether that's 2 years tax, nobody want to go down that road. So Hack is clearly stipulated. One of the things we cannot take into account is the cost involved. Now, I know, and there are other issues about some study, we're gonna be doing workshop where people can see, like, sometimes renovation or repair, it's done by some, and this is kind of the universe I live in, but I'm not saying it's your universe in terms of the availability of people who can do the specialty work. And I appreciate that you're always candid when you think a window is repairable versus what can be done, but no, we can't.
Anything's repairable.
Yeah, and these actually, it's, and again, I did not find many elements that seem to be
What
like.
is the threshold for your decision? Like at what point do you decide if it's repairable or not repairable?
Well, like if I had been, how I was.
Because there's really no window that's not repairable.
Well, I mean, if I were to say that you would have damage where you have loss of section in like the bottom rail, the top rail, the muntin, and anything that I tapped was soft, I would say, okay, this is, we're getting where the core structural, this is pretty much tapping in all the components they had moved. There were elements that needed to be tightened,
Right.
but there was nothing in the wood itself if you didn't just take it and clean it, and remove the paint and then adjust it and tighten it and put it back.
You want to take those whole sashes out,
Mhm.
repair the mortise and tenon joints on each one. The one had plexiglass in it that you didn't notice.
Yeah, and you mentioned that one, would need to be, so there's the glazing and there's the frame itself.
So essentially, we're rebuilding or making a new window like we were building the house.
We're
in
not, we're
1900.
refurbishing. we're refurbishing the
But
windows.
essentially, that's what we're gonna have to do is make a new window.
You take apart the pieces and you put them back together. It's something that's done in a fairly standard,
It sounds easier than,
I'm not saying.
it's not like it's a
discouraging.
special window with some ornate like scallops in the mullions or anything like that. It's just a window. There's not even, is there grids on your windows?
No.
Not even grids on it.
I mean, this is, and yeah, and actually you can sort of see where the Muntins, some of the Muntins, yeah, you still have some areas where the Muntins probably were. It's not as if this is an ornate elevation, right, with a lot of ornate wood or trim or brick with corbels and things like that. It's what makes, the simplicity is, that's the variation that you have in Newcastle. And I'm not dismissive, I'm just saying these are the parameters that are in the guidelines.
Right.
So
So what is the next step for him to replace his windows if he wants to? We're saying there's no other option.
Let me,
You're
let me-
asking,
let me say something.
yeah, you're asking the commission to
you're
make a
asking,
case.
right now, you're asking about commission.
Yeah, are you aware of the state's historic tax preservation, preservation tax credit program?
No, not at all. I've never heard that.
Well, now I'm telling you about it. So, it is, there's a reference to it in the guidelines, I think in the
The resources.
in the resources page, but the state has a tax credit program that is available for people who have homes that are contributing in a historic district. So everyone here, if you have a home that is contributing in a historic district, you qualify for it, and you can apply for it every 24 months. It's not retroactive, but you can look into that. I like to remind people that it's a resource because most people don't know about it. And it's pretty simple. Several people in town have used it, and I would recommend, just with any projects you're doing with preservation, reaching out to Kara Briggs oversees the program, and she can tell you more about it, but I just like to let people know that it exists because it's a resource that is available to you.
Sarah, do you know whether it would pay for the full cost of rebuilding the?
It's tax credits.
30%.
Yeah, it's 30%, and you have, and no program's ever going to pay for the cost of it, but you have, I mean, as it is now, you have 10 years to use it, you can sell the tax credits, you can give them away, there's a lot of flexibility with the program.
Tara, are any of those funds federal funds or are they all state funds?
I'm not.
They're
really
combination.
sure. I think it's a combination.
So we can't depend on federal funds then for them.
Yeah, I think the conversation would be, I know that they're having their budget discussions, so I don't know how much the state budget is allocating for these. I know that they're distinct from federal tax credits, because you also have federal tax credits.
Right.
So they're the two. The state tax credits are the ones that are more readily available and more quickly available for residential. So clearly they have a separate funding source. It's distinct from the CLG grant, which is the grants that the city, like certified local government grants. Those are the ones at Newcastle. One of the things that they got certified as a certified local government. So they get funding. Those are funds that come from the federal government, that come through the state government and are dispersed by the state. Those have to wait for federal funds. So we're gonna see where that's gonna go, but they have some that are already attributed. But the state ones, no, they do have a strong state program. And typically it's a 3-step, like if you're not on the historic district, you have to do a part 1. You're in Newcastle, that part 1 is like given, you're in the historic district, you're contributing everything, kind of a no-brainer. So it gets to part 2. The part 2 is not much more complicated than what you already had here, except for describing what you want to do and the cost associated. By the way, it's something you should know about that if you're doing a lot of work.
Is this information available online?
Yes. Yeah. And I can certainly.
So I'm not sure, I didn't really like get like a definite decision. I have trouble understanding what you're saying.
So that's not.
The next step for him would be what? If he wanted to only replace his windows, what would the next step for him be?
So the
commission's gonna
we
vote on
have
that.
to, you
Okay.
were mentioning, that's just a resource that I wanted to make you
Okay,
aware of.
that's fine.
And, this is not easy for any of us because as was stated by a commissioner previously, we all live here and we are all subject to these same guidelines and standards. We are in a historic district. It's a national historic landmark district. It's one of the largest historic districts in the country. And if the way that things are written is that if a window is repairable, it has to be repaired rather than replaced.
What if the
I
window
believe
in
it-
question
believe
is
that's-
one window?
that's
Strongly
subjective.
preferred.
That's
But she
something
looked
that-
at-
I'd have one question. What if he wanted to replace those two windows in his house and they were vinyl windows?
I don't,
Existing.
absolutely not.
No, I'd probably put 100 windows in Old Newcastle. You guys have probably seen my company name come through and all that. I'm saying if the two windows that he wanted to replace on the front of his house to put wood windows in were existing vinyl windows, would those
We
two
probably
be
could
subject
not.
to repair?
No, they're not.
So if there were vinyl windows already in there, he can go ahead and put wood windows.
It comes with
Or
your
if the
one,
windows
but
were like broken out.
Can I say something? Cause I live in a house with about 30 windows and they all needed work. Kind of like this work. And we've found over and over, it's less expensive to repair them than to replace them. If we had to replace all the windows, couldn't have done it, we'd have gone broke. So they are repaired. We pay the local historic preservation jeweler to do that work. But what I would say to you, because there's been nobody else, if you become proficient at rehabilitating windows, you can work here for the rest of your life.
I'm not necessarily sure. I'm not really striving for
I'm
that.
telling you.
I can repair windows, but I'm not really striving to go out and repair windows.
Well, it pays good. And it's cheaper to do it that way than to replace them in 90% of the cases. And that's what we found, I've been on this commission for 3 years and it's pretty consistent. So it's not happy news. It's not what you want to do, but you might save money and find a whole new line of work. Honestly, everybody in town needs this, everybody.
If I could say something, I find this part of the interpretation to be particularly egregious and burdensome to people in this town. It's your money, it's your house, it's your window. That's my view. If you want to change it, get a petition, go to your neighbors, take it to the city council and have them change the code.
I mean, yeah, that is something people can do, but we are in a historic district and this is part of living in a historic district. And if you went and moved to another historic district, you'd be going through a similar process.
Or worse.
yeah, Philadelphia is much more stringent.
Yeah,
Much more.
I understand that not everyone likes the outcome of.
Well, you end up with a piece of plywood in a window until.
Yeah, we're asking
nobody
to put
gets it
wood
done.
windows. The
Nobody
window
wants to live
is
in a house with
is
plywood
essentially
windows.
exactly the same as the existing.
I mean, I'm just going to say, this goes back to the conversation that we had earlier. We have to hold everyone to the same standards. If these windows can be repaired, then they
That's a
need to be
subjective
repaired.
interpretation.
It's not.
I
not
can look
when
at
it's
it,
your
that's not worth
interpretation.
repairing.
Not when we
That
have
is
this-
not true.
I definitely
It's an
said it,
empirical
I understand
interpretation,
the
which was done
preservation
by the
factor.
historic preservation architect.
No,
If
That's
you
subjective.
can't be respectful to the historic preservation architect.
I am
then maybe you
respectful,
should resign your position.
I'm just telling you, in my
Let's
opinion,
be focused
it's
here.
subjective.
This is not, we're
What
not
fits
here
around or
to-
square is subjective,
Well,
like everything.
That is not true.
I do feel like though, that at some point, the city, if it keeps on going down this path with the windows, is gonna end up with a city with a fabric of aluminum storm windows on everyone's single pane windows. So
I mean,
that'll be something they'll look into down the road. And a lot of the houses already got aluminum storm
we do,
windows.
and we
and they
allow
look bad.
aluminum storm windows because there was, because they do protect the window and they're removable. They're
And they're
not,
reversible.
No
they're
removable.
reversible.
I've never seen anyone remove.
No, I mean, it's.
It's almost like putting,
Go to
it's almost
18 Third and you'll see 30 of them
yeah, and they don't
on
look
one of the
good.
most
They don't-
prominent homes in the city.
They don't look good, they don't look
They
good
look
touching up a
fine.
wooden window.
They look just fine.
It's all subjective.
Yeah,
We need
that's,
to
that's
get
it.
back to this, because this is not a subjective process. This is why we have guidelines and standards, and this path that we're going down with now talking about, is this subjective, is this not? We have these guidelines and standards that were developed by subject matter experts. They were adopted by council. We ourselves, each individual commissioner, did not write them, but we were appointed to review these applications, to review the work and to follow them. And that's what we're
And
doing.
it's not easy.
And it is not
And I'm not
easy,
saying
so
it's easy. for anyone.
we have to take this emotional component out of it, and that we are evaluating these all using the same criteria. And I understand that it may not be what anyone wants to hear, but we have to be consistent with this. And
So we made a motion.
are there any public comments on this agenda item? Are there any other comments? Okay, would someone like to put forward a motion?
I make a motion to deny this application for 21 East Fifth Street to replace the windows and recommend a renovation of the windows in place of this.
All in favor?
We need a second.
Second.
Okay, sorry, thank you. Second, all right, all in favor? Aye.
Nay.
Motion approved 3-1. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Are you gonna stay for the next one?
I didn't know if I was up next, because you
Yes,
guys
I
did
think
the
so.
other one first, so
You're
I
sequential.
wish you would have did my two first.
Agenda is 117 East Third Street. Ty and Allison Colby.
That's,
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, there is a typo on our agenda. I apologize. Yeah, I do know your last name. I'm sorry. Long day at the end of the day. Okay. Tell us a little bit about your application.
Well, there's kind of no point after what we just heard.
Or feel like that.
So, yeah, we wanted to replace 14 windows, which is almost all the windows in our home. Because our present windows are in various states of condition, which Layla was kind enough to come out and look at today and photograph and poke around extensively. And also, as part of that, and I realize this is not a reason to replace them all, they're terribly inefficient, they rattle, and they have storm windows, which I hate. I know you just argued that storm windows look fine. In my opinion, they do not. I hate our storm windows. We don't want storm windows. What we'd like to do is take them off, but we only want to do that if we can have good, efficient windows in our home. All wood. Well, yeah, and they'll be all wood. I'm all for that. That's, we're not arguing style or I understand that.
Layla made a comment and an educated comment earlier today about how storm windows help preserve the original window. But along that line, you were mentioning that people walk down the road, drive through Old Newcastle, and they see the storm windows and they go, oh, they're preserving those windows. No, nobody drives through this town
Yeah, I
and
didn't
looks at
think so,
storm
that.
windows and says, oh, they're preserving the original windows. They're looking at them going, why in the world are there storm windows allowed in historic Newcastle? I've had friends who question me about ours. Are those legal? Are you allowed to have those? And it's like, well, I don't really know, but that's what came with the house when we bought it back in 2012. So, I mean, it is an aesthetic quality. I do understand the purpose they serve. But on the other hand, I think part of preserving history is preserving the aesthetic of it. And if you have windows that are hanging sideways or are at different various degrees of togetherness, or there's storm windows on some and not on another, or, it's not contributing to the aesthetic quality, the historical aesthetic quality. And I understand that these rules were written long before you all. But I mean, there is leeway to be done in that you are all each individuals that do have your ability to use common sense. And I'm not saying you're not being common sense, that's wrong. To look at things with common sense and aesthetic purposes. It's like, where do you go from looking run down and tacky to looking beautiful and appropriate for that time era?
And I mean, and one of the things, and just because it was, I think, very helpful having this whole conversation when you're asking about where the guidelines came from. And at the core of the guidelines, because it's a National Historic Landmark District, because there's a local historic district, because it's a CLG, it's all, and I'm not gonna go on a tangent of like the history of preservation, right? There's the Secretary of Interior Standards, and I'm sure you're familiar with all of those. And I think the reason that the storm windows were deemed to be acceptable because Newcastle is primarily a silly experience by walking, and when you walk, you can sort of see through there. And there's all this, I'm not going to go down the road of reversibility and things like that, but there was a big thought process put through in these updated guidelines, which were issued in 2016, so not that long ago. I do think amongst this group, I'm the only one, that remains because of the Historic Area Review Board, but they're still here from the Historical Society. So that's where that rationale, it is, and to your point, it's not a preservation masterclass. There is a rationale in terms of how these decisions were reached by a wide group of stakeholders. And that is kind of the framework that we work within. Now, these meetings are great opportunities for people to express their agreement or disagreement, which is why we're here today and, and for the conversations. But that's kind of the background where this comes from.
I mean, that's fine. I'm not saying I don't understand why
I
you guys
get
are trying to preserve the city.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we get it. We're not trying to put,
It's
vinyl or aluminum
It's
windows. We're
really-
trying to put wood windows on both of the jobs.
the intent is to improve the attractiveness of the urban environment of public and private investment and preserve the historic character and sense of community that make Newcastle such a distinct national historic landmark district. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to make our house look like it did more so when it was built than how it does now. We also want to put shutters back on it. And having storm windows off of there is gonna make it much better because we can actually put the hinges on. Used to have shutters, doesn't anymore. We want it to look better, so it fits in with the character of the town better.
Used to have, still have single pane windows that can be repaired. I'm not denigrating your perspective,
Like Bridget said, anything can be.
How long is there like a maximum? I mean, you talk about replacing windows. I think made the comment, how long is it acceptable, sorry, to have wood in your window while something's being repaired? Is there a rule about that? Is there guidelines? Is there?
She's referencing,
And I don't want to sound,
well, you're not throwing me under the bus. This is a great discussion.
No,
So
getting
there is, yes, there's plywood
Important issue.
in my window while there is some restoration work being done. I have a permit for that and my permit is still valid and
Permits
Yeah.
have a long duration.
Yeah,
The
I
only
mean-
example that I can give you is, and again, Jeff could speak to that part, but I'm working on a project now, which is a residential and working as an overseeing the work done by contractors, and they're doing repairs to all the windows sequentially, and they've removed them and they're replacing one after the other, and they're typically have, I think what the person's doing the work, he has like 4 weeks. Taking window or refurbishing, cleaning it, painting it, putting it back in, and they can put in all sorts of, the new pulleys and all the internal systems, those are all new, so they function very smoothly. So it's not that you're gonna have to wait, you know, and have plywood all across your window. It's a case by case.
You don't have to restore pulleys, you can use jam ladders.
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts, but there's all sorts of
Yeah,
components.
but I mean, if you're talking 8 windows on the front of our house,
Mhm.
you're talking 8 months at least of.
I'm just
wood.
saying, these
Is
are
that
different, you'd have to
practical
talk
for
to the
windows?
contractor who'd be doing that. I cannot speak to
We
that.
can send Richie up with a window repair business.
But
There's a wrinkle here. There is a wrinkle, unless I'm missing something. This house is not on the list of contributing buildings.
Oh, it
According
is.
to Kara Briggs, we are, and we are
Yeah.
on the list, because I researched it all and I
Yeah,
went to
it
Kara
is on the
and
contributing, yeah.
did that whole stage.
Wow.
one or
Yeah,
whatever.
you-
I'm
Yes,
looking at our
exactly.
website and you're not on it.
Well, you should be.
Could have taken the lifeline when they tossed it.
Yeah.
We're on.
No, they are, they know it. I mean, there's just, yeah, it is, it's clearly it is.
We're right across the street from Tara.
So I understand that, but I'm just saying you're
We're on
not
your
on
street.
this list.
Yeah, Your street too.
Well, I think also some of the numberings gets a bit awkward between the odds and the evens and the numbers.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and you did your due diligence, right? You reached out.
Sounds
That
like
was
it's
probably all
probably
that.
190. But
You had a comment?
Is the audience allowed to speak?
You can make a.
When public
comment.
comments, yeah.
Yes.
So I just have a question. I don't understand the storm windows and the requirement. I guess it's to provide quality of life for the inhabitants if the windows are cracked or leaking or whatever, so that you can heat your home. So there's a quality of life issue. So my question is, could they possibly replace their windows given that they have to have storm windows which prohibit the restoration of shutters? He just made that point. So he's looking to make a step, looking to make a step in terms of restoration by restoring their shutters, but they can't do that as long as they have the storm windows, and if they remove the storm windows, they can no longer heat their home. I mean, I'm just wondering if that's an argument that that you all could, I'm a professional preservation. It just occurred to me that they might have, I don't know, sorry, I didn't mean to.
No,
Thank you.
I apologize. Thank you.
If you could consider the Secretary of the Interior standards, I didn't know if you could help them make that.
I think that's, again, the Secretary of Standards. You do have one of the things is that when you have single pane windows, we all know they don't function as well as IGUs, but if you do go and refurbish a window, you can have, to the point of what Jeff was saying, you have a much better envelope, you have a much more surround, you actually lose much less of the energy, because a lot of the energy that's happening now is when you have ill-fitting sashes or crooked sashes, and you're losing a lot that way. I think the storm windows were something that was deemed as a compromise to avoid the whole scale, because if you were gonna go IGU, then it's simple. You're just gonna replace everything, because nothing is gonna meet current standards at this point when you have historic windows and single pane glazing. So that's where that approach, and the idea of that is that a storm window clearly stipulates what it is, it's easily removable, it's not attached, it doesn't create any risk to the window that's behind it.
I think what she was saying though was the restoration of putting the shutters back where they once were would require the storm windows to be taken off.
Right. So could that?
Act
could that be-
guideline interferes or obstructs the homeowner's intent to do some other level of
Well,
restoration.
but that's
That's
still does
legitimate
not-
observation.
That still does not negate the fact that you could take those windows and refurbish them and put them back, then they're gonna function so much better and you may not need a storm window.
Tara, I think we have another public comment.
Yes, I was just allowing.
I've argued
this.
that because how are the sash gonna fit any better?
Well, you tighten them up.
Well, tightening up is gonna make.
Weather
them
stripping, you can, there's a lot
You
that
want me
can
to
be
put
done.
Ugly foam weather stripping.
There's a lot of different types of weather stripping, there are.
I think we're sort of getting, I definitely don't wanna shortchange the conversation. Because I mean, obviously, this is a forum where, but if you wanna get into a technical discussion of different options for repair, there are a lot of people who repair windows that meet the Secretary of Standards without sort of winding up with bulging, foam or things like that.
I tried to get people to do this a while back. And they weren't returning phone calls. Some that did come out and look, never got back to me with estimates, even after me pestering them. And one of them had the one that I was closest with, 2-year waiting list. They can't wait 2 more years to do this.
We have.
That's
We have a
ridiculous.
train collection that's worth probably $50,000 that has got to get protected. We had the city or whomever remove the only source of shade and cooling in our house by accident when they took the tree down in front. We are fully exposed in the front and the back all day long in the summer. That's when we get hit the hardest. And that is the only source of cooling we had. We had to buy an air conditioner for out there to try to keep it cool. But we are talking about a significant investment
The
collection.
storm windows also create a greenhouse effect when there's direct sunlight. And there becomes a very, very warm, hot pocket in there, which I don't like. And then that ends up coming through
Coming into the room.
and makes the room hotter than it should be.
Sir, you have a question?
A
Comment,
couple of
sorry.
comments.
Comment.
I have a historic home, the windows are very old. I tell you, they were put in the thirties. I have storm windows on it and I have, the shutters on the outside of the house and they open and close just fine over top of the storm window. As far as the greenhouse, I get the morning sun until around 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock on the front of the house. There's no greenhouse on mine, so perhaps there's a lot of humidity in the air in the home.
On mine,
Yeah, I can't speak to.
I mean, there's no
I can't-
condensation
I'm not-
that would
I'm
kind
not
of-
suggesting that
No.
you have to come up with an
Right.
answer for me. I'm just pointing out.
It's a thought, but I mean, it's a matter of, we know, we have him sat there, his office is right there too, and the heat coming out of that area
Yeah,
is.
it sounds like there's a problem. Yes, you're right.
Because
I also think the shutters fit and depends on the application. If it's like a brick mold window, it might be different than a wood trimmed window with a sill. The application's gonna vary on different windows, different structures, different materials, so.
Can I just, sir, could I have your name just for the public comment for the
Leonard
record?
Mattis. I'm at 154 East Second.
Thank you.
Leila, you didn't have any comments associated with this that were in our packet.
No, because I managed to, I had been ill, but I managed to go, we communicated late, early this week, like last week, to figure out when to come, and we had a candid conversation with the contractors, we were able to get together there this morning. And that's why it was familiar what we're gonna say, and I mean, I know that something else that was mentioned when we were there, but it's on the application, was the intent to replace even the sills. And and I had sort of poked in a bunch of sills that actually I could have in proximity, and I know there was that one area, they have the gap where that could be a potential detriment or repair, but no,
well,
so.
it's not a gap, there's 2 holes in it. And there's the other window sill too that's actually sinking because of drying out.
So I think-
Below the air conditioner.
I mean, and those are conversations that they were actually in the proposal per se, because the proposal's focused on the windows and potentially the shutters with no details. So no, we went and we looked at them, and it's kind of the same conclusion as the previous one, which is why I told the contractor we're sort of in the same territory. That when I had looked at most of the windows, except for the one that's at the lower level in the back, where there's some missing muntins. But most of the, keep poking at things, and you were very gracious with your hospitality this morning, allowing me to get through
We
everything.
appreciate it.
And they do have one. Collection, I have to say that. But they were all, I mean, I know it doesn't help, but they were all, they were all, from my perspective, something that could be refurbished and repaired with minor, with minor.
Do you notice that there aren't any specs for the shutters in here?
Yes, we talked
so-
about, they were reference matching the others, and I also said, like, in this typical, normally there would be more detail about the damage of the window. But we were close to this hack meeting, I realized, we were gonna
Right,
meet this
at least
morning,
in
so I thought it was good to have this conversation. As opposed to say theoretically, can we meet and then document and then come back and have this, because the intent of replacement was also clearly expressed.
Right.
So I think that was also.
Shutters would be the typical mover upstairs, stop it downstairs.
Right,
Because-
no, that's true. I
because
saw
it's
that with
right
what next door, but we're required to have the specifications of the product that will be used, correct, Leila?
Yeah, typically there would be
Yeah.
like, if there were that detail, typically like they'd be in the proposal,
I'm just trying
you
to
know.
go through all
For
the,
that, so that's
and that
something.
can be, that's something that can be submitted, so it's not an issue.
Yeah, those typically, if it's adaptive things, those can be into your one.
The window have children?
Didn't he call out the window?
Yes, no, we're talking
Yeah, the
about.
window, the shutters are really just, it's just a wood raised panel painted shutter, and then the lower ones, I think, are louvers. They're vice versa.
Vixen Hill,
They're just wood shutters.
Vixen Hill or?
What's that?
Vixen Hill shutters or?
I'm not sure what,
I'm not.
Yeah, they're just not, yeah, they're just not,
Get 'em from-
they're not in the, I mean, those, if they're shutters to be reinstalled, those could also after we be a follow-up with the tier one, you know, if that was something, the big issue here is the window.
Right.
It won't be helpful to you, but we had to restore our windows too. And we had more windows than you, and it cost half as much as you did for the replacement windows.
How long ago?
Been going on over the last 5-6 years. It's been a process.
that in and of itself is pretty things.
Yeah, something we definitely take care
Are there any, there's one that's.
Did you, with your contractors, with the Sturgis?
Sturgis did work for us, but they didn't do the windows. Yeah, the windows were done by Rob Stafford and, do you know him?
Is that Mill Creek or something?
No, Quarry Mill, no. Quarry Mill is a whole other
Quarry
ball
Mill,
of wax.
that's
We're
what
not
it
gonna
is.
discuss that tonight, but Rob's around. He's been restoring the front of DJ's
I
house.
think he's the one that gave me the 2-year waiting list.
Well, that's-
Yeah,
They're almost done. They're almost done.
Your fault.
That's fine.
2 years before you.
Yeah.
I think with this, if we're talking about like a scope of work of also replacing stills or doing any work to them, that's not included in the application, which is.
That was just
something
mentioned in the
that-
conversation. this
Okay,
morning.
I would also say that there's nothing in the photos that were submitted that we can actually vote on that shows that there is damage that warrants full scale or wholesale replacement of the windows, because we just have photos of the windows from, you know, the front elevation, and that's something that's detailed in the guidelines and standards, with what's required with the application. So just going through and doing due diligence as we do with
Yeah.
everyone. It's just, as this is presented right now, even there's nothing showing specifically that these windows are damaged beyond repair.
And then that's the fact where I had said, you know, rather than sort of just, you know, that we did talk about going and taking a look, because that's something that we're doing more and more because people are coming with the.
Yeah, I never claimed they were damaged beyond repair.
Yeah, and you
I
were-
was saying the windows are fine and could be restored,
Yeah, you and he.
but they
you-
want new
You were
windows, that's what I
exactly,
said.
and you were very candid, and I just wanted to confirm that so I could come and report to Hack, you know, and I actually have like 15 pictures at this point. But you know, kind of all the details, sort of like your trains, when I get into something I really do. And you were very gracious about de-dusting me, by the way. I was wearing black, which is fine. I don't mean to be facetious, because I do appreciate where you're coming from. So yes, so I mean, clearly from what I saw on site, I thought better have this conversation sooner rather than later, to not wait for another month to come and then, which is why we're here today.
Are there any comments, commissioners? Are there any public comments regarding this agenda item? Would someone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion in the affirmative. I make a motion to approve the application as submitted.
Is there a second?
We need another motion.
Thank you for the first one.
Okay, I will make a motion to deny the application as presented based on a lack of supporting evidence that the windows are damaged beyond repair.
You probably need to put in something about the shutters.
And there are no, there's no spec sheet or information on the shutters.
But please come back.
Oh, I need to. Yeah, it can be resubmitted, so you don't have to go through and pay the fee again. It can just be resubmitted as an updated application to the office, so there's no fee. I just need a second for that motion if we're going to.
Second.
All in favor? Aye, all opposed?
Abstain.
Motion approved. Again, and thank you for your application. And if you have questions. You can come with,
We can walk across the street up the road, go to church.
And I think
You know where we live.
Yes, I do. Thank you all.
Thank you
Yeah,
so much.
thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you all for bearing with us.
Is yours out?
All right, next we have 406 Delaware Street, Jenna Albright. Is there anyone here to represent this application? Do you want to give us an overview, Leila, please?
Yes, so it's for the installation of a sign on an existing bracket that's that's there, the way it was a sign before. I think since there's already, and that has been there for a while, correct, Jeff? This-
Yeah.
So I think the only question, that I've visited, it's high density fiberboard, it's not wood. And it's a 1/2 inch, so it's fairly thin. So normally the sign in of itself, not it should be wood and it should be painted. So, as is, I wouldn't recommend proving it.
Well, it also says printed front.
Yeah, exactly, and it shouldn't be printed, it should be painted.
Yeah.
So as is, it could not be approved. You know, if the commission wants to deny this one, but if the principal assign as long as it, you know, as long as it's actually wood and that the lettering that's there is painted on it, that can be reviewed as a tier 1, that's the way to keep this moving.
I think it's weird that the picture that they showed us doesn't match the proportion of what they've.
It does not, and I think also, I mean, I think when they're gonna have it, they're just gonna need to have a scaled component, because this seems to be much taller, you know.
Yeah.
And the way it's sketched, it's much more, it's like a 12/24,
Yeah.
Right.
something like that, and it's actually gonna be taller to make sure that it fits. But if you look at the brick coursing.
Yeah.
It's probably gonna be a bit tight at the scale without it coming over the door. So I think it could be just have a consultation to refine the actual size of the sign and have.
It says it's 1824, which is a pretty large sign.
It's gonna be a pretty tall sign, and if you have the coursing of bricks, it probably is gonna come in, so it's gonna just be narrower and slimmer, to be more like what's showing here than what's there.
So is it 1824 or is it this skinny? Because 1824, which is the size that they have on their
Well,
document.
they've written I mean,
Yeah.
you have to go by what's written on the application and by what's shown in the graphic, which is clearly in terms of proportion 1824. So I think there's an adjustment of the size, board can be said to come back with a new size for this one.
Yeah.
Those all, yeah. But I would not recommend approving it as is.
I think something that we could do is we could approve the concept of having a wooden sign that is painted and that the lettering is painted. But we could refer it to Layla, you know, even doing an on-site consultation to make changes with, you know, the scale, the size, things like that, so that it's appropriate. And then the application can be revised, and as long as everything is consistent with what you have discussed and what we've discussed here, then it can be approved as a tier 1.
Yeah.
So then
They'll be a lot happier with it made of wood too, because the lighter material will
Oh, it's
blow.
gonna fly
yeah,
out.
it's gonna fly right off.
Sideways.
It's gonna.
Yeah, with that scale, it's just gonna be like horizontal.
So.
And then you're just gonna make sure it's 7 feet off the deck with your bottom.
Yeah.
And I think
Bring it above the door.
the location of the arm is a little bit, it's a little precarious.
I mean, better than a lot of them.
It's, but that's, it's
Yeah.
there, like,
Right,
I
it's
put
already
a sign in
there,
the
yeah.
middle of top of my door, like literally right there, not necessarily, but it's something that's there, so for this, it's fine.
It's fine. So, I'll make a motion to approve the concept and principle with the exception that the materials have to, be made to conform. And that after a consultation with Leila, who can approve it as a tier 1.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion.
It's gonna be a great little store. Really, really pretty. I think
We definitely need to make sure that the consultation occurs.
Yeah.
Within less than 2 months.
Yes. I will put that in my, write-up to Marika. If something happens. Okay, moving on to, Bull Hill Park, this is the Colonial Dames.
Hi, everybody.
Welcome.
Are you really a colonial dame?
Yes. I am.
Welcome.
And, you are married?
No, I'm not.
No?
Mary Hendra lost her husband 4 days ago.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Could you please?
My name is Karen Marshall.
Thank you.
And I'm the chair of her Historic Activities Committee, so, and I apologize because, I don't think we consulted with you. This has been fascinating. I'm enjoying the process and I love this island of history that you preserved, so I just want you to know.
Thank you.
I was your preservation officer in Chester County for 20 years.
Oh,
So,
Where
I
at?
used to come, Chester County.
Very nice.
I love the Chester County Archives. I got lost in those archives.
Cliff Parker is one amazing human being. Yep.
Neat research.
So
is like the
I
most
worked with
incredible
Debbie
thing.
Martin
Yeah.
in Delaware and in the
Yeah.
city. She's from my own. I don't think there's anyone left that I knew down in the, anyway. So anyway, I always used to come down here and think, wow, I wish we could do it. Wish we could do it this, where we don't have I don't think we have as strict a harbor in any of those places we have harbors in. Pennsylvania's not as. Anyway, okay, so we're here. Are you all familiar with the park? And
Most
did you have, I
definitely.
thought maybe, do you have questions about the application? And well, I'm sorry, we didn't consult with you. I apologize. Well, no, you could have told us what we should have had prepared, so I'm.
No, this is fine, and
Okay,
all the information is here, and I know Wade Katz,
Wade, I worked with Wade, we documented Battle of Brandywine for
Yeah.
10 years together, so.
No, I think it's consistent with the signage, the educational signage that we put there.
Right.
So it's gonna add additional, the materials are consistent, the purpose of what it's going to be doing is consistent. So I think, I have no issues, that's it, okay, so it's gonna be on a brick pad, and it's gonna be using, I'm assuming, the same types of.
So what we were advised is that we're gonna work in partnership, we're gonna work with the city for the installation. So it's better to have the city with Public Works do the installation so that it's done correctly and according to the requirements of your other pathway sign.
Yeah, so I mean, I thought this is something that I'd be, happy to recommend as,
Okay, thank you.
When you say it's like the other pathway signage, you mean the signage around town that
The one that's there.
It's pretty there.
Yeah.
One that's already.
Young man, she's gonna be
But
like.
yeah,
that
it's just
next week.
Like that's the partnerships thing.
Exactly. I should have had a little chart, so that, I did
We
the,
understand,
do you
I
know
just
the-
was asking.
we're adding the little triangle thing.
Yeah.
So there's the,
Yeah, there's sort of like the sketch and the picture that sort of shows.
put that in there, okay.
They put that in, and they said there would also be, the same material, the brick pad, it'll be the same dimensions as what's under the existing, and there's that picture of the existing that's there, so it's consistent with what's been put there. And we would do so.
You'll be happy to know that I personally redrew the map of the city to put the new Fort Casimir monument on it.
Oh,
It's on the website.
thank you.
Cause it was so important that they discovered it was
You
further
know,
away.
We figured that when they put that parking lot in, somebody picked up that old marker and just stuck it on that corner
Yeah.
next to the fire hydrant. That has to be how it got there.
And they didn't find Richard III either. So that's disappointing. Okay,
All right. Are there any public comments regarding this application? So everything looks good. Like it's in order. So, with that, unless there are any comments, concerns, I think we can go ahead and, put forth the motion.
Make a motion to approve as submitted.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion.
Thank you,
so much for
everybody.
coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for bearing with us.
Thank you for letting me put my 2 cents in. I was having so much fun listening. I just had to go, maybe.
It's a public meeting.
why don't you move here? We'll put you on the commission. You can enjoy our misery with us.
All right, so moving along, we have 142 East Second Street, Charles and Kentner, with an addition. Would you like to start off by telling us a little bit about your application?
We want to put a 12 by 16 room on the back of our house. And only a small portion of it will be seen down the alley from the street.
Yeah, we've met with our neighbors on either side. And they're happy that we're doing.
Great. Layla, would you like to give your?
So, yes, so it comes to hack because it's an addition. The proportions, are fine, and it is pretty much quasi completely shielded from the public right of way. Which means that alternate materials are appropriate, which is what you have, right, with the LP Smart sign. I think there's one question that's more so like a code compliant question, the fact that there's just the 2 foot setback from the neighbors, and I think since Jeff was here, we could sort of bring it up, but in terms of, now I did, one question that I had is, I see all the materials for the addition, which is, LP Smart Side standing seam. I do see that the windows are, have them in front of me and then I put them away. So I do know that you're gonna have standard wood trim. I do believe the windows are fiberglass windows, but they are in the back, and that has been deemed acceptable on some new construction in the rear. The one question that I was not completely certain about with all the details is, what is the breezeway going to be? Unless I
As they walk through to the room.
Yes, so it has no 3-dimensionality? It's just a passage, because you're showing a new 4x4 breezeway. So I'm trying to understand, is that gonna be an extension for the LP Smart Side?
It's the piece between the existing houses.
Yes.
She's asking about the
What is it,
materials.
It would be treated with the same material as the house, as the addition.
Is that an open pathway?
No, it's not.
It's an
No,
enclosed.
It's enclosed.
It's enclosed, but it's not, just because we have this very high level of detail of the addition, but we don't have any detail of the breezeway, the connector. So that's where, and it may be that the application and the motion would have the caveat of viewing this when the building permits are provided to confirm the materials on the breezeway. So that.
To clarify, we spoke when we spoke with our neighbors after we submitted this. And our neighbor that we were going to be 2 feet from would prefer we attach to his house. Which, well, the rest of our house is attached to his house. So he would prefer that we did that.
So that means you would be moving it further back.
Right.
No, it would be further to
one
the
side.
Side.
Yes.
To this, yeah.
Now, what I mean is you're not adding an extra
No,
2
no,
feet.
no.
You're shifting the whole thing.
Moving it over.
So that means there's
Just
even
6
less
foot out.
visibility from the.
Which would give the alley between ourselves and our other neighbor on the other side, who happens to be his mother-in-law, another 2 feet of alleyway for her to access her.
So how are we gonna, you show a mini split compressor in that little alcove?
And
No,
we're
no,
right
no.
now. No, not in the alcove, in
Well,
the,
you showed the mini split compressor between you and your neighbor.
right.
So now that you're gonna move up, I mean, I'm saying up, plan up towards your neighbor, are you gonna flip the compressor on the other
We
side?
think, and I'm actually meeting with the people that did our air conditioning as well. But I think we're able to, eliminate that compressor.
Well, and I think what we can do is, because I think if anything, this conceals it even more from the public right of way. And again, that can be a thing where the details of the material of the breezeway and the location, when the drawings are finalized, those can be reviewed with an administrative review, if the overall concept, so that way you don't have to wait to come to HAC. As you figure these things out, we can then, and if you have any questions, you can reach me through the city, so you don't go too far down the road if you have any doubts. If you know what you're doing, then you're fine, You definitely don't need to. That makes
Right.
sense?
Absolutely, but you do have to submit a building.
Yeah, you're gonna need,
I know.
you have to have those testing.
And you don't even know, I don't know what I don't wanna do, because I'm always like.
So other than that, in terms of materials, everything looks good, I think.
And I have a question about the last conversation about all the houses in the historic district being historic houses, because we were just denied by the state for that program, just telling us that our house is non-compliant,
Non-contributing.
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 Well, they get it wrong a lot of times.
Yeah.
And sometimes they get it wrong on purpose when they run out of money for this year, but that program keeps going. So.
Well, how can we help them? There's something we can do.
Well,
The homeowner
We
has
can
access.
appeal, you know that.
We can appeal, and we have valid reason to appeal, because they're telling you that our porch was an add-on, but our basement goes out to the end of our porch. In front of our,
Oh,
I know, it's above our porch.
Just come to me, or
Yeah, and I mean, there's also a differential between when you're applying for additions or new construction versus when you're applying for rehabilitation and restoration or preservation work, so there's a nuance there. And you can have that conversation with Jeff, or if you want a nuance about how you're presenting the work, then I'm more than happy to help you how to interpret that.
Thank you very much.
I do wanna make sure that the motion does mention one thing. In your proposal, they were giving you the option of a credit by putting in vinyl casement windows, and vinyl windows are just not an option, either in the front or the back, across the board. In the front, in the back, new construction vinyls are just a no, so that $2,700 credit is just,
Okay, so fiberglass or wood?
yes.
Okay.
And I think the motion just needs to.
or aluminum maybe, if you.
I mean, aluminum, yes, it's all gonna depend on the structure, I mean, this is sort of like a bit of the prefab of what LAPP does. And the combination between that and because, you know, it's actually gonna be secondary, so those are conversations, but yes, you have range of options for the windows, just not vinyl.
Okay. You don't have a problem with that.
And so we basically need to, we can approve this in terms of concept, design, materials, but ultimately we'll refer it to you for tier 1 approval if everything is.
Of the building permit.
Yeah.
Drawings,
Mhm.
particularly since there's some elements
Yeah,
that are
we're
missing
waiting
and
for a
the
couple
vinyl,
of quotes
say the
to come
vinyl
in,
is.
and then we get copy drawings.
The question, is tier 1 approval, if we submit plans, for the building permit, does it automatically go to?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh,
It will come to me, yes,
Okay.
because the permit application will come to me. And the city, or I can give you my card, if you have any questions before, while you're talking to your contractor, you can just send, contact the city and they'll shoot an email and we can have a conversation before you go to the full design.
And if we talked about putting up a short piece of fence to hide our trash cans behind, should that be a part of that?
Yes,
also?
and if fences are appropriate, those typically can be a tier 1 easily. So I would just put that in there too.
Okay.
Yeah, the fences up front is kind of ratty, that little skeleton.
But I mean, those, a typical fence replacement, even if you weren't doing everything else, would be.
It's not a replacement, it would be a new fence, but.
Or a new fence, if it's not something that's like very long or distant, and particularly if it's considered to conceal an HVAC unit. We've often approved those as part of the HVAC permit installation.
Well, I just wanna hide all of our trash cans.
That's units, trash cans, anything.
Thank you.
I don't wanna look at them and I don't think anybody else does either.
Are there any public comments regarding this application? I have to ask this after each one because it's stipulated, so I just, I'm not doing this for the sake of, extending this on. Well, that's great. Any comments, questions, concerns from, any commissioners? Okay. If we're feeling good about this, do I have a motion for, approval based on, the concept as presented, in terms of design, scale, massing, materials with the exception that vinyl windows are not used?
That motion can be my motion if you don't want it coming out of your mouth. But you said it. so-
Yeah, thank you. I just, I'm going through it as,
Yeah.
so we can approve the concept as mentioned,
Do we need to mention the 2-foot move?
Well, that'll go through
so,
That'll go for the.
Yeah. the permitting, yeah.
sorry, at this time of day, my brain is just buffering a little bit, so bear with me as I try to throw
We
this
can
together.
include as modified with,
Yeah.
Right.
A shifting of the footprint
Mhm.
2 feet towards the adjacent neighbor.
Okay. You got that, Kathy? Okay, that's my motion.
So then,
Second.
wait, hang on, so if everything works out, we recommend this for tier 1 approval, so
Yes.
long as the,
Okay, for tier 1.
All in favor? Aye,
Aye.
motion approved.
thank you very much.
Thank you for coming in,
Thank you.
congratulations.
Enjoy it. I hope it gets built in your lifetime.
Thank you for your process of elimination. I'm guessing no one here is representing, Jack Gernowski. Okay, so since no one is, let's go, if everyone is okay with that, why don't we skip down to item 6?
Yeah.
Since the
Before
applicants are
ladies
here
get
waiting,
there.
yes, and we can just move along, so you don't have to spend any more of your evening here. Okay, thank you for bearing with us. This is a longer than usual meeting. Okay. Could you just state your name for the record and tell us a little about your project?
Courtney Lamb. I am just trying to put a sign up for my business, Joel Vintage, 203 Delaware. Wooden round 24-inch circle, hard painted, sealed.
So you want to install, a metal bracket to hang it on. Chain. Would you like to give your summary, Lydia?
Yeah, I mean, the location on, this is also a a prominent key building, so it kind of has a higher level of scrutiny. And you also want to make sure that it's sort of not clashing with other components that are very streamlined and simple. So, and it's hard to tell because you don't have like an actual mock-up. I know you've done this, I'm not talking about this, I mean, you don't have like a quote from somebody with a production drawing that we could see. It just, the 24-inch round is fairly sizable. So I mean, the materials, if we're confirming that it's gonna be sort of like a wrought iron chain and wood, and you said founded wood, and I'm guessing, so I have a couple of comments. One is that it's pretty tall and prominent. And I would say if it could be, now typically signs on there have been applied to the elevation, right? They're not sticking out because this is like this highly visible building. So my initial reaction would be, this could be a surface applied sign to the side as opposed to sticking out. Sure. I think that would be a much better option. And then I also think that in the building, you have existing anchor holes where they had put the previous signage.
Inside of it?
No, on the building, on the masonry, because they used to be, before it was last season.
Yeah, there is some sort of, there is something there.
So
I'm not
if
sure
you can reuse those, you know, and you have to see if it works with the size and everything like that. I think that would be another option. Obviously, if you're gonna put it on the masonry, you might need to adjust just the diameter, because I know the clearance that you have between the downspout.
Right.
And if we're to that, I think just from a design perspective, we do allow for, the guidelines do not have any criteria about the type of font, which is fine. I'm comfortable with that. I would just say, although I love the Jolt vintage, I think it's gonna be, as a sign that stuck out, the Jolt was like really, it was taking up so much of the wood surface. I think it's gonna be wood applied against the wall, then I think it could be sort of more discreet in terms of the scale. So I would say if this is a sign that could be put on the masonry itself, as opposed to sticking out, because the whole volume is perceived in a very clean, neat way, that would be the perfect option.
I just want to
Have to
say. Yeah,
And I just wanted to show
Don't
this
mind it.
image
Yeah.
here, just for,
And if we,
So,
you know,
there was a
and if
sign
you have to
before.
adjust the scale of the,
so there was like one there and then there was one here, so those are where those
for the
holes are.
record,
Oh,
you
very
being
low.
shown
Yeah.
the sign. that used to be
But
on
you
the
can
building.
also, you can talk about position, like the positioning of the
yes,
sign.
And if
Which is
people,
not significantly small.
That's,
If it was
yeah, I mean,
single,
I think that's
That would be
really.
about.
well, that one's small, we're not saying you have to
Yeah.
match that one, we're
The
saying.
size of that area
Yes.
is that
And,
big.
and we'll,
Right.
yeah, and so we'll see, we'll see what the width is there, which I think is still can be bigger than that sign, and see. I think that would be something that would just be more comfortable approving, because if not, you're gonna be the one thing that's sticking out from a whole, and it is a pretty building. It's not like the others. Now, if the commission is comfortable with that, I'm happy to meet with you on site. If you wanna, troubleshoot, I mean, I can give you my card, goes to the city for the permit application. And it doesn't have to be something that waits another 30 days before figuring out what's acceptable. That's if the commission is comfortable with that approach.
So.
I have a question, are we approving a size or a maximum size or?
I think what I would recommend is approving a sign that does not protrude from the building because of the specific nature of this key building and because of the overall
I mean,
appearance.
it's not gonna hang perpendicular to the face of the
Yeah.
building, so it's
So I'm
going
saying-
mounted on the building.
Yes, on the building, and at that point, the size of the sign would just be maximized by, the leeway of what you have on the brick on that side, and whether it can still be circular, whether you might wanna extend the shape to make it a bit bigger so it's more visible, that's a different conversation.
You've asked for 24 inches, you may find that
I understand, yeah, I just don't know, I don't know how big that small
Right, I
area is
think-
on the left hand.
I think
don't
also
know.
because that picture was taken from an angle too instead
Yeah,
of face
yeah,
on.
it's a little hard
That's
to tell.
why having a meeting with Layla on site, you can.
Yeah, and I mean, if I'm looking at it, I know you definitely have at least 2 bricks. So roughly, you clearly have like 16, maybe 18 inches, you know, and you may decide that perhaps you go with a sign that, you know, curved top cut but taller because of what you want to do, and then you could place that, which would not, it doesn't have to be the small sign that you saw in the picture that
Right.
Sarah shared.
No, I understand that. If where that sign is so low, is that the
Mhm.
highest I can put it?
No,
How high do you think?
well, I mean, that's our code.
Well, no, you actually have a rule for that.
We do have a rule.
It's gotta be below the,
The
below the,
second story.
actually
floor.
above the floor, that floor above, you know, below
I
that
mean,
floor.
we're talking about the floor, you know, the floor level there, so it doesn't mean that it has to be down here.
Oh, great.
It has to be-
It would have, I mean, in the picture, it's a lot lower than that one.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
no,
So
you're
in the
not,
same area, but just flat. That's
yes,
fine.
flat, and maybe if not as tall as that, but at least certainly you can come up to the top of the door.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cause there's like a brick, like inlay, like
Mhm.
right above.
Yes,
Is that like what a sign used to be like there? Like right above the
not
front door?
necessarily, but I mean, it is also a potential, like in some cases.
So that wouldn't be too
signs-
much to be in the middle right there.
Right above the door.
Well, I mean, I'd be more comfortable, I mean, you do have the parity of what's there versus what's on the other side, because you do have, you know, that's kind of matching either side.
Mhm.
But it's an idea that could actually be entertained. If there's nothing on the other side,
I do know that the Terry on the other side,
Mhm.
does want a sign as well and wanted to kind of like have ours
Maybe
look
put it
similar.
together,
Yeah, there's a cartouche on the other side.
yeah, there's
Yeah.
cartouche on both sides.
Yeah.
So I mean, it could be, now, is that cartouche higher than the limit of where the sign can be max? It's kind of
Keep it
borderline.
below, you keep it below.
That
the
cutout,
window.
right?
Yeah, it's probably under the windowsill, yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes in the, between the sill and, so I mean, yes, that could be, and that certainly gives you prominent. That gives you prominent real estate. And that's a question of the commission, you know, if the commission's comfortable with that, that's maybe a conversation.
The sign applied as delicately as possible, so we don't tear up the bricks.
Yeah.
You know,
Of course,
Put the
of course.
anchors in
And
the
then
put the anchors in the joints.
I mean, that's gonna happen wherever you put it, whether it's in the cartouche or whether it's on the side, when the brick, you're gonna have somebody who knows.
Yeah.
Are you happy with the discussion?
I mean, it sounds like the only thing that would change is the flat against the brick.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think where we can go from here is that we can recommend this for a tier one approval after you meet on site and discuss this, and then you can submit a revised proposal.
Mhm.
Layla can review that as we refer to them as tier ones, essentially a staff review.
And it is.
And
Mhm.
and you can approve it. We would ask that you do that, have the site visit within 60 days, just because that means Jeff doesn't have to
Deny you
follow up
administration.
with you, yeah,
Yeah.
and chase people down, so, yeah, so if you're okay with that, we can go ahead and, for a
Be
motion.
sure it's painted. Don't let someone come in and talk them into doing an applique or something else.
I didn't even think I was allowed to do that.
No, you're not.
But you could get caught up in the moment,
Oh, no.
okay, and then you have trouble.
So Courtney, why don't you tell Terry if she wants me to help her design one that's complementary to this? So I just did a bunch of graphic work for her and I think she was happy with it, so tell her I'd be happy to help her. I'll tell her too, because I'm paying her all the time, but.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we have a motion to approve this, the changes to this concept as discussed.
I think what I would say is just, it's approving this almost like more like a consultation and
consultation.
upon further discussion with a revised application, that revised application based on the parameters, and you can state those can be approved as a tier one. There's no additional cost involved, it's just, then we have one record.
I'm just a friend, so I'm not involved really, but so if she was to meet with you tomorrow
Mhm.
and then does the revised
Mhm.
application, will she have to come back next month or?
No,
is it
that's a
like-
tier one.
Really?
We typically, they come in a rolling basis and they get tracked. We typically try to turn them around. I mean, some cases been a couple of days, in some cases been a week. I've been out sick for 10 days, some of them are 2 weeks, but it's definitely not gonna be a month. Now, unfortunately, I cannot be here tomorrow. But the other thing is, yes, if you send me an email or call, and if you don't hear back, I'm also very comfortable with texts. Just tell me who you are, what it's about, because sometimes, you know, when we have crazy days, that's easier just to multitask and we can respond to a text.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and put forward a motion to refer this as a tier one pending a site visit and revised application with the sign being flat against the brick, thank you.
And also size adjusted.
And the size adjusted based on the location that you deem appropriate.
And because the prominence of the cartouche, do you want that to be entertained, or if it goes to the cartouche, do you want that to come back to happen?
I think that's a good question, thank you. I think with the cartouche, if we're going to use that space, because it is like an architectural
Yes,
feature.
feature, and I have to see if on the other sides and we.
It looks like it is, but but isn't your concept kind of the circle?
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, that's her branding, so.
So the circle will have to be on the side, it can't really be.
Yeah, the only thing I'd say with the cartouche is if that's something you decide to use, and if the weekly also, if
Then they
Terry
should
wants
be
to,
like
then
that
I think they should both be used because of just the symmetry of the
Yeah.
building. I think it's important that that's maintained, so
I'd have to be on the left. I haven't made it here.
I think that
I'm actually
depends on
partnered
what
with Terry, so
what
we
the
are.
sign looks like,
we
and
can
that's
go
why
together.
we're referring
She's
this.
on the,
I think they always put it-
just her business partner.
And so that
She has those with
Yeah.
the trustees.
Need to know.
They've signed.
Yeah, they signed the application.
Mhm.
Okay,
Cool.
Would you like
Is there
to restate?
any addition to the motion? All you did was, refer it to Layla.
Yep, so.
It has to be flat and, the size could change based on the location.
And if located in the cartouche, it needs to be, do we need to put that in the motion?
No, you say if any location of fifty, that's not speak. We can, that would be just me and the tier one saying, okay, that's not gonna work after we just.
Does it have to be a square if it's in the cartoon? I mean, I just think it would look sort of.
It just gets off, it gets
The
very.
cartouche is really long and thin.
Yeah,
It's a totally different dimension from the, well.
It's also because of a classical building, right?
Of course.
And that's it, you have square windows, that the arch portion is kind of the
I
archway.
don't think it would look good.
No, it
It's
would
totally
not.
fine to not.
Yeah.
Okay,
Motion made it through
I'll make it.
second.
That was easy.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming in. And yes, thank you for your patience. Thank you for that. All right, almost there, home stretch.
Oh, this is the fence. the
Yes,
fence,
so-
Fence.
Now we are at 144 East Third Street. Jack Barnowski, I may or may not be pronouncing
That's
this correctly.
Did they get a permit for this, or do they have to get a permit
You applied for a permit after you bought them.
after they built it?
I drove down the street, there's a brand new fence.
Okay,
But it looks pretty good.
So Layla, I know you can't, would you mind just giving us,
Yeah. So when these are regularizations, I can't say, supporting that. It's because it's post facto, so it's already outside the process. Now, the other thing is also typically fences, the typical fence when they say matching the exact length and height, but it's not
It's got
matching
the
the
same
existing
character.
fence. And typically in the historic district, it is something to what's there, which is, it's either dog ear or the sawtooth, and this is not, and it's pretty much a wall. So if this had come as an application in a regular process of year one, I would have said approved, but it would have to be either, dog ears or sawtooth. So I would not have approved this.
They could make it be sawtooth very easily.
Yeah.
Well, that's it, he could make it easily sawtooth.
And I'm sure that after I discuss it with them, if you guys approve that, it'll happen right away.
Yeah, I do think that, again, we have talked a lot about consistency tonight and the need to, you know,
Keep it there.
keep with the guidelines, and I know this has already been done, and it's unfortunate that this individual did not seek approval prior, but I have to agree with Layla that if this design had come to us, you know,
We would have
knowing
said
there,
no.
this would not have been, so I feel comfortable denying, you know, this design as presented, but if, you know, if the applicant can use the materials that he already has, or that they already have, but I do think it's worth noting that the design with the sawtooth, again, something is you have, you know, it's not tight, you know, it's not, they're not lined up, you know, butted right against each other. You have those
There's an open
gaps.
space.
So I think that design also needs to be incorporated. Yeah, it needs to be.
So why would you do that? I mean, the character, yes, but why would you force them to put whole spaces in between the?
The boards are gonna shrink anyway, every time you build a board fence.
That's not my question. I'm asking from a design and historic area commission perspective, why we would make them emulate the fence that was there before. You didn't make me do that for my property. I put a completely different fence up. So, what's the objective here?
No, I mean, I can't speak to Tara's comment, I'll let her answer that. My comment is this has been a fence that come up, it's, you know, it's a very dense fence and but because what sawtooth does, it creates a transparency.
I agree with the sawtooth side of it. I do agree with that, but the other fence had various distances between the wood that was there. It, you know, it may have been at a time when it made sense to have a fence you could see through, but perhaps there's a situation now where they would not like to have a fence that you can't see through. So why are we opining on that?
Because I think that's the aesthetic of this style of fence, is that there is some movement there, that there's light that goes through, kind of like a picket fence.
Yeah.
You typically don't see picket fences that are just, you have the planks just abutted next to each other in a tight row. I mean, not even.
Does the fence go back or is it just that one space?
It's just that one section, and the fence along the side matches, the height is different, but it's the.
Yeah. How tall is it?
Was
But
the
it's
previous one
sawtooth.
4 feet?
Yeah, it's the same height.
About the same height?
I think if the top point, but because it was sawtooth, also
Yeah, it looks
that
a
part
little-
you see more,
small.
but this looks like a privacy fence that you
Yeah.
have in the back, you know, in a new development.
And this is a rental, he said he needed the fence to block off the back.
Oh, if it's a rental, then he's all over about permits and getting authorizations to do what he's doing. Or is it the renter who did it?
No, it's the owner,
It's the owner, not the.
who ought to know better, if I'm
Yeah,
allowed to say.
How many times?
Yeah, well, maybe he gets a little fine at the same time, monsieur.
Well, I mean, he should, even if it's
Yeah.
regularized, there should be. I
Yeah.
mean, but again, we don't.
It's not our job, but you know, he owns about a lot of properties in town. He's a nice man. I like him. We went to his bourbon tasting with him the other night. But this is in the same category of other business people just scoffing the rules and doing whatever they feel like. And, you know, if it doesn't start to hurt, then it's gonna keep happening, right? But I was just questioning why you would make him put a space between. If he sawtooths it, is that enough?
I don't think so. I think that, I mean, I think when you see this style of fence, you know, anywhere you see it, you typically have like
It breathes a little bit more.
these spaces, yeah.
I mean, honestly, anyhow, when he takes it down, unless he's gonna go and take a saw and try to saw cut them in place, which is gonna
Yeah.
create a bizarre.
And
I disagree. We have loads of soft and solid fences.
Okay.
The average one doesn't have a space. The spaces in the
Evolve over time.
board fences come as the wood shrinks.
Mhm.
And especially if it's a softwood like cedar or something,
Yeah.
they'll shrink up. You'll get an eighth or a quarter of an inch between them. You still have your privacy, but
But so are we content to leave it like this and let it shrink? I mean, that's what I'm asking for, because I think what Tara is saying is that he has to space them out now, and I think that's unreasonable.
Well, the only thing that I'm saying is this, again, this looks like, as Leila mentioned, it just looks like a modern privacy fence.
No, I
the
get
way
that.
it's.
Yeah, but if you
it's-
put a sawtooth on top of it, you've added the detail backing. My question is, I would state it clearly,
I
why do you wanna
understand the
make them
question.
separate the boards?
I think there's just a different perception of what is the aesthetic typically what would be done with sawtooth fences.
But you can make a slightly different fence, so why go to that extent? If you can make a good case for it, other than because it was that way before, then I'm open to that, but that's not a good enough argument, in my opinion.
Oh, I mean, but I should let the people having this conversation respond. I just
Town
find
is
the
nearly
sawtooth-
300 years old or so. How old is this town? 350 years, right? So there's been a lot of fences in this town in those years.
no, none of those fences are that old except the iron ones. The fences have a lifetime of 15 to 20
Yeah,
years.
well, don't we know it?
I've had one fence replaced twice since I've been.
And we haven't used the same style of fence for 350 years.
No, we've got a whole little monograph that act of different
Yeah,
fences
but
that
what-
are approved, and we went to different jurisdictions. and-
Yeah, so there is, and this is clearly not one of the approved ones that's there, so I think that's a conversation we're good to have with
He
them.
was a bad boy to put this thing up without approval. but
Yeah.
I don't have a
And he has
problem with
paid
fence.
Fences
An
are,
extra fee for that.
Right.
We're not likely to take him to court because
But he can, I mean, it's not a question about, that's not the question, the question is that he should be told that it's not appropriate and it needs to be done, and that's gonna be part with the enforcement. I think that's the thing, and I don't see anybody going, you know, I
he already
think
knows
that's.
the least he's gonna do is make it so.
Yeah.
but my question didn't get answered.
Well, was another discussion happening, so I wasn't able to
Okay.
answer the question.
All right.
So I think, again, so the reason I'm saying this is that, again, this is something that was put up without the process of us being able to evaluate the design with our subject matter expert.
I understand that.
Yes, and I'm getting there. Please let me finish. Thank
Alright.
you. What I'm saying is that I think that in reviewing this design, it's still, I understand that the boards will shrink over time, but this still looks very much, even just putting the sawtooth there, I want to make sure it's visible from the public right of way.
It
It's in a
is.
very prominent position. It's in the front. If this were in the back, I wouldn't be asking these questions
Yeah.
because it's not visible. But this is. I know you can't opine right now, but is this something that we could refer to you to reevaluate as to how this proceeds with how this should be?
Oh, we can certainly
prepared?
have a conversation
You know,
when there's the outreach to the applicant. we can go through the
That's,
workflow.
I think that's overkill. I just asked, why does they have to be spaced out?
I mean, if
Give me
I,
a good
You
reason.
got an answer to a different question.
Right.
well, no, I
It's a
think.
good answer, but. it's a
No, I
different
think
question.
there's an answer. I hate to be the one sort of coming as an arbiter. I think there are two different perspectives of what is an appropriate fence. Now, I do think this is a very tight fence for a street side fence, which is typically because it's so very tightly together. And if this had been a normal application would have come with that kind of fence, and most of the drawings that we see, they are not this tightly together. There's always that slight breather space in between. And they're very rarely this dense on the front. So again, I understand the rationale for saying if that could be, that would definitely be an improvement. And it comes from that perspective, because
Okay.
when these are done in this way, in this manner, they typically do have breather space. They're
Okay.
not, in the back, they do tend to be much more because they,
That's
there's
right.
much
You
more
gotta keep the
privacy.
dog in or whatever.
Yeah, in the front, they're meant to be, you know, you have a little bit of this breathability in between.
Okay,
So
that's an answer I can accept. We don't need to go through all kinds of more review. I just wanted to understand why. you
Yeah,
know.
that's good rationale,
Okay.
and
Thank you.
we can have that conversation when we talk to him.
So we're denying it.
Well,
Well, you know,
Why?
actually,
if you're gonna deny it, you're gonna all have to state reasons why you want me to try to go to court and make them rip it down.
no, let's, I mean, no, I think we're
let's
going,
modify it.
yeah,
That's.
no, I think we've done a number of things where we said it's denied and it has to be adjusted and fixed.
Modified, yeah.
And that we've done that in 2 or 3 cases. So I think we can just do that and say,
Yeah.
and reach out to the applicant and explain the change. And when the change is done, you know, or if there's a change, then that can be, and there's no fee, just to come back and say that's what they're doing. So they're on the record saying that they're going to be doing that. I think it's important. Beyond that, I don't think it needs to go down the secondary road. I think it's being.
But he's gonna ask that question too, why do I have to space them apart? And
No, the
he's
question is
doing-
gonna ask,
give him-
if we're talking, the question you may be asking, like, do I need to do the sawtooth? And so I think that's where this is presented in the way it is. So to be said, it's not appropriate. This is denied. It can be resubmitted as a tier 1 if it comes back as a, you know, to be done as a sawtooth and demonstrated as a sawtooth.
And separated.
Yeah, I mean, what, and that can be just to be reviewed as a tier 1 for that conversation with a more typical. Then that's a way that this one gets capped and then the other one. Any other issues of enforcement that come, that's kind
That's
of
his one.
secondary,
Yeah.
yeah.
And he's so happy about it, look at him. how
That's
happy
all I'm
he is.
saying, I mean, when
There's
we,
not another separated, and there's plenty of sawtooth right on the street.
Well,
We've got
that's it,
one on
so-
Second Street
yeah.
at the corner of Harmony.
And we're not,
Yeah.
we're-
And we've got them all over the place,
That-
and none of them are spaced.
but that's why we're allowing for the tier 1 to be able to do that, and we'll have a consultation, but this one, the way it stands, because it's not, and the differential between this one and the other ones, it's like a porch, if you wanna be consistent. It was blue because it was done without, but had it been done and had it been a replacement materials and this, it was done, it does not have, and it's not appropriate.
Okay.
So that needs to be acknowledged, but also say, come back with it, you know, as a
Or
tier 1.
just say it would be appropriate with a sawtooth. And people
Well, that's
again,
not what,
have to
but that's,
spend
that,
another-
listen, that's not what she said, and that's why I was drilling down and trying to get it clear.
But
So-
it's something the commission could say. To
Well,
simplify.
that, the chair doesn't wanna say that.
What, I think, okay, so I think just to
Let's-
simplify, it, my recommendation would be, because it's presented at an application for something that is not appropriate. I know it's a post facto, so I can't speak.
Yeah.
But I would say presented like this is something that I would deny. And in other cases, it has been done where it has been denied with a caveat that a revised application could be submitted and reviewed as a tier 1. Without going into the details, just saying an appropriate design as a tier 1, so we don't, the question of spacing, or that can be a conversation that had. And if we agree that it's, you know, it doesn't need to be additional spacing, that's something that I can speak to as a subject matter expert. And
Okay.
the plan B is to do a conditional approval. That's, so this commission can decide how, you know, to move forward. In either case, it's still gonna be a tier 1, it can be resolved fairly quickly, one way or the other.
thank you, that's really what I was
That's
getting
just-
at, is just this design, I don't think it's enough to just say, okay, well, you can just saw it off and then it's fine, I think it needs to go through a little bit
More
in
of a
the process, so, all right, would someone like to make the motion? There are no further comments, questions, concerns?
So, I make a motion that the, 203 Delaware, oh no, sorry, the 144 East Third Street, fence, proposal, be declined in its current form, and that we ask that it come back, to the city as a tier 1, and have a discussion with our architect, to come up with a revised design which can be approved as a tier 1.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved. All
Alright.
right, there's no further business. I make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Thank you.
Yeah, you get paid extra for the overtime here?
It started at 6:40 this morning.
Yeah, me too. Yep.
Water department at 6:40 and
Oh,
the Hackett